Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Lavinia Haddingham and I'll be chairing the meeting today. This meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except for where there are confidential items or exempt items, and if any member of the public attending the meeting objects to being filmed, please advise us immediately and we will ensure they are not included in the filming. Members of the public and the press may record, film or photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. May I please request that mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. So may I introduce Gemma Walker, who's our area planning manager. Our legal advisor is Ian Deprez, and we have case officers Bradley Heffer here and Bron Curtis will be via Teams. Our governance officers Claire Philpott, Alicia Norman and Beth Webb, and I'm going to move straight to the agenda. So item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Sarah Mansell and Councillor Jen Overett is substituting. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2, to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any interests to declare? Item number 3, declarations of lobbying. Are there any to declare? Excellent. Item number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Are there any to declare? Item number 5, MPL/24/25, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee held on 9th of April 2025, contained in the table papers. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Hardingham. A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Elkin. A governance officer will now conduct a hands-up vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, all those in favour of confirmation of minutes? Thank you. And Councillor Overett, can I just confirm you're abstaining? Thank you. So that's 7 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. So the minutes of the meeting have been confirmed and will be signed later. Item number 6, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move to the schedule of planning applications. So the first item is DC/21/04377 Grove Farm, Queen Street, Stradbroke, IP 215HH. I will now invite Bradley Heffer to introduce the application to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. The first item on the agenda today is your consideration of a full application which seeks planning permission for the erection of 42 dwellings and the conversion of 2 barns to dwellings on a site known as Grove Farm, Queen Street in Stradbroke. This slide shows a wider aerial photo highlighting the position of the site in relation to the settlement. This aerial photo provides a closer view of the site. You will note the residential development to the north, if I use my cursor. That area there. And also to the west, on the opposite side of Queen Street, is the established factory premises of Skinners who manufacture dog food. Queen Street runs approximately north-south on the slide you can see. This is the site location plan, the extent of the application site being shown in red. Other land that's under the ownership or control of the applicant but is not forming part of this planning application is shown edged blue. This constraints map specifically is identifying in orange, the nearest listed buildings in relation to the application site. The application site is the hatched area you can see here. Listed buildings are identified in orange. The conservation area hasn't come out very well, but it's this pale colour here, Stradbroke Conservation Area. Parts of the site are within the conservation area. And the other notable feature on this slide is the extent of the settlement boundary, which is defined in the neighbourhood plan. Again, it doesn't come out particularly well on this slide, but the development boundary, sorry, it comes up along that northern part there as well. This is the proposed development site layout that you're being asked to consider today. I will go through the slides later, photographs, but the existing access to the site is approximately where you can see my red dot at the moment. It's proposed to relocate the access and provide a new spine road into the site, terminating in a turning head. And you will note that the majority of the dwellings will front onto that main spine road. There are instances of smaller private drives here, here, and here, which lead off of the main spine road. The other element that you will note is that the application site includes a long stretch here down to an existing building, which is one of the two barns that's proposed for conversion. The development you can see is a mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace, two-storey dwellings. This extract is taken from a plan that shows the means of access to the site and also the off-site highway improvement that is also proposed as part of this scheme. You'll note that there's a new crossing proposed in Queen Street, which will be linked through to the site via a new footpath provision. So I'll just show that again so you're clear. It goes down to there, the crossing position there. There's no further path past this point that could be used, so pedestrians will cross at that point and then continue down southwards along Queen Street using the path on that side. This plan shows the proposed PV panels, photovoltaic panels, proposed to be installed on all the dwellings, and also you can see, bearing in mind the colours, how many panels proposed for each unit, but all are served by PV panels. Again, you can see the green dots hopefully just about come out for EV charging points, either where you've got on-plot parking, they would be on flank walls adjacent to the parking space on plot. In instances, and I think there is only one instance where there's off-plot parking, which is here, it's proposed that there will be bollards provided instead. Again, this is not entirely clear. I've tried to blow this part up as much as possible, but in effect, each of the proposed dwellings and the converted buildings are going to be served by air source heat pumps, and each will have a water butt. This plan, again, it shows vehicle parking and cycle storage. As I said before, most of the parking takes place on plot, apart from that remote example here. It is all to standard, and the provision includes visitor spaces, which are mainly located along the spine route, but there are some visitor spaces elsewhere within the site, for here for example. But for a scheme of 44 units, there's 11, which is the standard. This one is showing the provision of affordable housing. You'll have note from the report that the requirement to meet the policy standard would be 15.4%. The policy standard 35% would be 15.4 units. Obviously you can't provide 0.4 of a unit, so there's 15 units proposed within the scheme, shown with either the red dot, which is affordable rent, or blue dots, which are shared ownership, and the 0.4 our colleagues in the strategic housing team have requested to be included as part of the proposed section 106 agreement that will be attached to a grant of planning permission. I'll now show you some views of the development. This is a view of the frontage showing the converted, one of the converted, proposed buildings converted, for residential conversion, and a new dwelling next to it. If you've had the opportunity to drive down Queen Street fairly recently, you'll have noted that there is a dwelling that's under construction at the moment, approximately in this position, which has been built under a previous approval for development in that location. This is the proposed conversion of the barn that's near the new access to the site. You'll note that even though it's a residential conversion, I think it successfully repeats the character of a former agricultural building. That wouldn't be lost, which we consider would be particularly important, rather than making it overly domesticated in appearance. This is the proposed conversion to the other barn at the southern end of the site I identified earlier. Again, it follows the same sorts of approach in terms of design. In terms of the buildings themselves, they use the dwellings themselves, other dwellings, a new build, they use a combination of render, masonry, brickwork, and plain tiles, which is a palette that you'll find in Stradbroke, and the design itself follows a vernacular approach that you've seen before, but again, given the context and the surroundings, it's considered that it's appropriate within this location. I have included this slide because it identifies what I would consider to be a bespoke housing unit that's been put in to actually turn a corner properly, which you don't often see with larger volume developers. They're not keen to have this sort of design within their scheme, but it's certainly a helpful device for, you'll have noted from the scheme that I showed you the layout, there was a curve in the road, and it enables that curve to be addressed by built form, which is a traditional feature, something you do find in villages, and we're pleased to see it's involved in this one. This is a typical private dwelling, and this is a typical detached private dwelling, and this is a typical affordable unit. In terms of the approach that's taken, we feel that there is a synergy between the build. So in other words, the use of the phrase tenure blind can be supported here. You wouldn't actually, we don't think, go down the new spine road and be able to identify immediately where the affordable housing units are in relation to the overall development, which again is a key requirement in design terms. I'll quickly run through these. These are the ancillary garage buildings. Not all units have a garage, but where they have one, it's a traditional build. Again, takes that traditional approach, which is considered to be important given the context. This is the existing access to the site, which would be closed, with the access moving down roughly where my dot is, at the other side of that building. And these buildings here would be part of the group that would be removed. Again, there's another shot of these buildings that will be removed. This one on the frontage, which is part of the older barn at the front, would be retained because it's a valued element in the street and could be reused and provides a nice frontage on that side. So that will be retained. These more functional type buildings will be removed. This is the existing boundary of the site with Grove Farmhouse to the south. And this is a view of the existing building that's near the new entrance, which will be converted to residential use. This application, you'd be aware, has been in for a number of years, but when it first came in, the application was accompanied by information advising that the structural soundness of this building and the other one, the one to the south, is such that it is capable of conversion, which is important. That's an example of a building that would be removed. This is a view looking north towards the housing area that exists to the north of the site. This is looking back towards the existing farm group as you approach the centre of the site. This is an existing lagoon that was probably part of the, I don't think it's a natural feature, as you can tell by the fencing here. I think this was part of the agricultural use when it was, I understand it was a dairy farm at one time, but it's a feature within the centre of the site. And this is the existing track leading down to the area of open space. This is the area of open space to the east of the site, looking over that. And then this is the route down to the second barn that will be converted. Apologies, because I couldn't actually get any closer because of the brambles, but the building that's been proposed for conversion is behind here. This feature here, the existing pond, would also be retained as part of the scheme. And that's finally looking over that remaining blue edged land looking towards Queen Street and the existing development along there, again to try to give you some sort of spatial context of where development is in relation to this site. I think that's the end of my presentation. The only thing I'd like to now run through quickly is the table papers that were circulated yesterday, just to go through the points that were raised in those. You will note, firstly, that the parish have provided further comments from the ones that are in the original report, and you've hopefully had a chance to read through the comments that are made there. We have received one letter of support for the application since the report was drafted. You also note that Anglian Water's provided us further comment in which they're objecting to foul water connection. If you read through the comment there, that explains what their objection is about, and as we read it, it relates to a pre-development inquiry not having been agreed with Anglian Water. They do, however, identify that if the LPA were minded to recommend an approval to you, that a condition could be imposed. And the effect of the condition is that the pre-development inquiry or the strategy has been approved prior to the commencement of all development. So I think that's why, in my advice to you, I think that it would be acceptable to impose that condition because we still have the control in place in order to make sure that Anglian Water are happy with the connection to their system. A thing that was actually raised by the ward councillor at one time was whether the foul water and the surface water disposal drainage would be mixed, and that certainly isn't the case. They're separate, completely separate systems. So we have also clarified that. Leading on from the Anglian Water comments, you'll have noticed that the drainage consultant has also, the applicant's drainage consultant has also provided further comments in relation to that, which again explains from their point of view how they think that the whole site would work and why they don't think it will be a problem in terms of securing that approval. So again, I think that underpins why we feel that a condition in this case would be reasonable. Just finally, two other points. In my report, I identified at one point that it was £44,033 per dwelling, when in fact it's actually to pay for per place in terms of the early years new build contribution. I should add that as part of a planning permission that was granted, or an outline planning permission that was granted on land to the south of the factory premises that I showed you on that map. There is land secured as part of that permission, that outline permission, for an early years setting. So the money that's been secured as part of this development would presumably go towards the setting up of that setting. And the other thing is that originally advised by the Highway Authority, they wanted a contribution of £10,000 to improve bus stops in the vicinity of the site. We're actually located down at the cross of the T-junction, Queen Street, and the road going to the south near the church. They've now advised that instead of doing that, they would want that secured by condition. So again, if members are happy to accept the recommendation, we would condition that rather than seeking a contribution through section 106. So I think that's as much as I'll need to say at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
So are there any questions from members to the case officer? Councillor Pratchett.
Thank you, Chair. Just with reference to the types of housing that's there. So I noticed there's no bungalows, and obviously with this village, sort of predominantly it's probably got an older population, sort of going off national average. So what's the break point? What's the requirement when we have to start insisting on bungalows?
I don't think we can insist on them, because in order to do that, we would have to have some sort of policy base in which to make that insistence, in all honesty. We can try to negotiate with developers with regard to bungalow development and whether it fits in with everything else in terms of layout and design. In this case, the approach that's taken, as I said in the presentation, it was felt to be a spatially and visually appropriate response to where the thing is located. I think if you look round the area, the surrounding area, I didn't know bungalows, to be honest. If there'd have been a lot of bungalows, and clearly the context would have been different, but given that context, we were happy with that approach.
Over it.
Yeah, just in relation to that. Dwelling in 10 to standard M43. I think it's great that all the houses are M42, certainly that's very welcome. But given the number of houses, it would be a really good opportunity to make better provision given the level of need for accessible properties. So I think that is regrettable that's not in there. And I don't know if there's any leeway for that to be considered.
Yes, sorry, Gemma's just advised, in terms of the mix and everything else, we've been guided to, as you'd expect, to a significant extent by our strategic housing team generally. Again, I understand the issue in relation to bungalows, but it's not something that we as officers can insist upon. And if we are presented with a scheme that does, in our view, combine spatially and design-wise to create a development that we think is worthy of support, then I think it stands on its own merits in that regard. I understand the point about bungalows, but I think that we're content to support this on the basis of the context in which the development will be located.
Councillor Elkin.
I got two questions, if that's okay. One about drainage and sewage, and one about the affordability, kind of the cost of maintenance. With the drainage, I'm sorry if I missed it, but I don't think we had a flood risk diagram, and I think it said that there was risk of, I think, low to medium risk of groundwater flooding. throughout most of the site. I think it said plots 1 to 40 something, which I think is nearly all of them, and that they were being raised up 30 centimetres. So I just wondered if you could explain how that works. Is there flood risk? If that keeps the houses out of any potential water, can people still get in and out of their homes? Can they walk on the paths, or are they going to be underwater? And what's the sort of risk of that actually happening? So that's my first question.
Sorry, Councillor, I just want to get to a slide showing a layout, then hopefully I can explain that. Apologies for not including a flood map, by the way. I know that's something that we should normally do. So, the existing site, the site is not within, firstly, in terms of fluvial flood, it's not within, it's in flood zone 1. So none of the site is affected by fluvial flooding from rivers or sea. It is impacted by groundwater and surface water flooding. And if you look at the flooding map, the main areas of flooding are where the open space area here is proposed, and also there's an area that extends through here. That's a very rough idea, but in terms of the mitigation of it, what's actually proposed is that the drainage from individual dwellings would go down and would be channeled through the main route here, and there would be attenuation cages underground, which would be here and here, and that would attenuate the flow of the surface water into the nearest open area, which is here. So the drainage would take place into the existing watercourses, but after it had been attenuated. The reason I'm not showing you a plan that's got lots of basins on it is that the ground conditions, as I think is in the report, the ground conditions are not appropriate for that form of attenuation. So it's got to be channeled in some way, it's got to be managed, and the management is basically from west to east. In terms of the standing water issue, you're right, the application proposes that the ground would be modelled in any event so that drainage was pulled away from the vulnerable uses, i.e. the houses, but also the levels, the finished floor levels of the dwellings that are identified as being within these areas would be raised slightly. So that would be mitigated in that way physically. The way that the drainage works, the means of access is single point here, isn't it? So you would need to be able to get in and out safely. And the drainage map, if you look at the surface water drainage map, doesn't include any of this area here in terms of presenting a hazard that may cause an issue for vehicles or people needing to get out in the event of, a very unusual event. So I don't know if that's covered that one.
Thank you. Yes, it's just, I had some groundwater flooding in my village. Water literally rose up through people's floorboards. So you wouldn't want people to not be able to insure their houses or anything like that if that's known to be a risk. But maybe that's something I can ask the applicant about insurance.
Sorry, the thing is we're very keen to bottom that out. We've been very keen, bearing in mind that local knowledge has advised of the ground conditions regularly. And I know that my colleague in the lead local flood authority has objected a number of times previously to this, culminating in a scheme that's presented to you now. So I think it's certainly something that we're very alive to.
Confident. Is it all right to ask my second question?
Hang on, I've just got a question while we're on water, if that's okay, Lucy. A, can you point out where the two or the ponds that are already there and on the slide 12? And also, I know I'm a bit thick, so I've already asked you about this, but can you go over again what Anglia Water's points are why they're not very happy, but why you think, and Jason or whoever is now happy with the scheme because of whatever? Can you explain why Anglia Water's not happy and why you think it's okay because it's been covered by conditions?
That's one of them, which would stay, and then you've got some buildings behind here. There's a driveway that comes around the back at the present, and then you've got a feature in the middle, which was that slide showing the long linear drainage area, or the.
So the pond is, you're saying?
That would go. That's not shown as being retained. That's being, that's basically in this position here, so that would be filled in. That feature. The other feature, the other pond feature, which is at the bottom here, hopefully you can see the red dot, that is proposed to be retained.
Oh, I see. So that was one of the ones you showed the pond at the bottom.
Yes, yeah.
Get there with the brambles, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But can you explain about the Anglia Water then? No,
Yes, our understanding is that there is a foul water connection on the site. It's located to the east of the site, and there's a connection there, and the developer is required to connect to the nearest connection. There's no reason, if there's a connection available, as I understand it, that you have to provide any other treatment plants or anything because you've got a connection going through to the existing sewer. I think that the issue is whether the connection is appropriate as it stands or it needs to be revised. I don't think there's an issue with capacity, as I understand it, and I think that it's really bottoming out the technical elements of the connection of the development to the existing provision that is the issue that Anglian Water have raised. They've said that they would prefer that information is provided prior to determination, but bearing in mind that Anglian Water have a statutory duty, as I understand it, to provide connections, we feel that development, if you're happy with the elements of the development in terms of planning, the actual technical requirements to connect are something that can be dealt with by way of condition. But certainly my clear understanding is that there's no lack of connection, and there's no doubt in my mind that there is available foul sewer capacity in order to deal with the development. I mean, the applicant is here. I know that it may be something he'd be able to explain in some more detail as well.
Thanks. Councillor Marriott had a question.
I find it rather worrying that none of the roads will be built to an adoptable standard, and particularly in respect of people in affordable housing. I wonder if there's been anyone has looked at the actual costs of the service charge as to how much they will affect those people who are less well off.
That's certainly right, Councillor. It's an application where none of the infrastructure has been offered for adoption. All of it will be maintained privately by a management company. The Highway Authority comments are predicated on that. They've recognised that. There will be a management charge for residents. Insofar as that may impact on the affordable housing provision, we did look into that, and I know colleagues in our strategic housing team looked into it and approached RPs for their view, and I understand that that's not something that's an unusual situation. They seem quite content that there would be a management company in place, and that wouldn't impinge on them wanting to actually take on the affordable area, the affordable dwellings in this development. But most certainly you're right that there will be a charge for future residents in order to make sure that all of these things are maintained properly by way of a company.
Hang on, just while we're on that, sorry Brad to keep interrupting other people's questions, but in the late papers, the Stradbroke Parish Council have I don't know if they've picked it up or they've suggested it, about rather than it just be a blanket cost per dwelling, that it could be based on the dwelling size rather than just, you know, you're number one and we've just, you know, split it between all the houses. Is that something that we could, or is that sort of out of our hands as planning goes, or is it something that could be...
My advice would be that we're concerned with the provision in terms of whether it's functional, whether it works, whether it hangs together as an appropriate development. The management of that, the future management of that, I don't think is necessarily a planning issue. If the applicant is able to demonstrate that a management company approach will enable these areas to be maintained, then I think that's as far as our particular involvement is. Certainly, I don't think we can, if there was a lack of open space or a lack of road access, appropriate road access, things like that, that's a different thing entirely. But I think the detail of the management of it, I don't think is within the planning remit.
Councillor Patchett.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I mean, I think Councillor Elkin did have a second question, though. No, okay. So, if you can go back to the pond, the one that you sort of said looked man-made, to me that doesn't look like a pond. It looks like an old slurry pit if you said this was a cattle farm. So I guess I would have concerns about sort of contaminated land, because you did say it was a cattle farm and it looks very square and it's got that kind of slope actually where you would, because I've kind of brought up on farms and to me it looks reminiscent of a slurry pit, but again I'm not an expert on it, but would we have concerns about contamination from this site considering its former use? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I'll just get the picture up. Yes, my impression when I went there, and I'm like you, no expert, absolutely, is that this had been excavated because there's spoil. I mean, it's a long time ago, or a fair time ago, because there's spoil around here. I'm not reading that is a slurry pit as such, but even if it were, I think that we again have relied on the contamination report they provided and the information that has been considered by the land contamination officer, because it is, you're right, it's a key consideration. That feature would go as part of the development in order to enable the development, and that's got to be done safely. But as advised in terms of the land contamination advice we've received, it doesn't give rise to any concerns.
No, I mean, it's just an observation, you know, we'd just like to sort of cross the T's and dot the I's that, you know, we're sort of, it's not contaminated. Just, to me, it just had the appearance of a slurry pit, is all. But if, you know, if we don't think it is, then maybe it's not.
Thank you. Well, some of it's been asked. It was about the issue that the parish council had raised about affordability and the maintenance. But I just wanted to, I think the report says that it's a rural exception site because it's just outside, is that right? It's just outside the boundary, some of it. So, and I understood the purpose of that in the neighbourhood plan was for it to be affordable homes. Could have got that wrong, but that was what I'd understood from it. So if that was why it was being brought forward as a rural exception site, I just thought maybe that issue of affordability and how much this charge is going to be did seem to be a planning issue. But I could have got that completely wrong.
As I understand the situation, excuse me, planning permission was granted for a development in 2014, and that predated the production of the Stradbroke neighbourhood plan. When the neighbourhood plan was made, that recognised the permission that was still extant at the time on that site, and basically said that permission has been granted on this site for a development. I think the key point here is that that development hasn't started, so therefore it wasn't commenced, so therefore it's not live. No one could carry out that development. It's basically gone. But the neighbourhood plan does recognise that if that were the case, I think it's Strad 19, that there's a list, and it's in my report, that any development would have to comply with. So I think it's a two-step process. Either that one would have been built as approved. If not, basically, which is I think is the correct approach, you have to look at any new one on its merits. The fact that that's coloured in, for want of a better phrase, means that it's recognised that it's valid for residential development at this point in time. As I also said in my report, it may well be in the future that Stradbroke decide they might not want to include that piece of land. And that would then mean that under a new made plan, neighbourhood plan, that site may be taken out. Until that point is reached, I mean, this is second guessing as well, but until that point is reached, at this point in time, as part of the development plan, that land is allocated for development. As long as and development has to comply with Strad 19 fundamentally. There's other JLP policies and neighbourhood plan policies it would have to comply with, but that's the key one. So that's the basis on which we've judged it.
The fact of it being a rural exception site, if it is judged to be so, does that not have any bearing?
I think that the rural exceptions element of the previous approval was a key element in it getting improved.
Yeah.
Approved, in other words. Because at the time that application came in 2014, clearly the site was outside of the settlement. So there must have been, and again I wasn't here then, but it must have been a key consideration that the type of development enabled a permission to be granted in those circumstances, and then following on from that, the neighbourhood plan has sort of recognised that.
Okay, so it sort of superseded it.
Councillor Marriott.
I just wanted to mention on page 15 here, it was, sorry, Isaac. It was mentioning the, sorry, I've gone from page, an electricity outage on the site and the requirement for the developer to ensure that there was adequate power to the site. But I can't actually sort of see that as a condition. Perhaps it's part of another one. Page 15 it was. The SNP identifies that Stradbroke experiences partial blackouts due to the way in which electricity is supplied to the village. The SNP identifies that developers engage with the electricity provider in order to avoid the likelihood of power outages being increased. It's considered the developer's responsibilities would include the provision of a suitable electricity supply to the development.
Thank you, Councillor. Paragraph 3.4. I think that as far as I can advise, that's the key element of my response is the last sentence. If a developer is considering a development proposal, then part of their responsibilities is to ensure there is an adequate electricity supply. I'm not aware that there's a particular issue in relation to gaining electricity supply to this development, and it was an issue that I think was considered at the time of the outline application that's south of the factory site in Mill Lane. Having said that, clearly it's something in the Stradbroke neighbourhood plan that's been an issue locally, but it's hopefully moving forward. The ability of a supply to actually meet demand in this location can be met.
Okay, I just couldn't see anything in a condition sort of relating to that. I don't know if that's been considered.
Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I note that Stradbroke Parish Council have mentioned the question of a footway to Grove End, a connection, which was originally indicated, presumably in the 2014 application. Would there be any benefit at this stage, and would it be possible to require there to be a connection? It looks to me as if at the northeast corner of the site, it comes very close to Grove End, and a connection might be easily provided. I'm not sure if that's the case, but perhaps it's something to raise with the parish council to see if that would be a benefit to the community and the new residents. Can I follow up? Just on the subject of the service charge, there is concern generally about the way in which service charges tend to go up and up and up for properties, particularly for leaseholds, of course. But is there any way of making sure that service charges, because they're levied by a private company, don't become unreasonable in the future? Generally speaking, I understand that we try and go for adoptable roads and so on, so as to prevent that happening.
I don't think it's, I'm afraid, not under planning law. I think
I'm advised by my legal colleague that on your second point, Councillor, I don't think it's possible under planning law to actually control the level of payment.
yeah, I think, yes, I agree. This one, that's better. Yes, I'm afraid I don't think it is possible under planning law. I think, as you may have said yourself a moment ago, Councillor, it's the indirect ways of ensuring that they don't become high because the roads are adoptable. Therefore, that's not there's less scope for private justification for private charges. I don't think, given the limitations on the in policy and law and planning conditions, I'm very hard to imagine a planning condition that could do what you suggest, although it would be, I can see it would be desirable.
Is there any more questions? Sorry, Councillor Warboys.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, could you just clarify where we are with Anglia Water and what sort of condition we're going to apply? Anglia Water has objected. Reading through it to understand it's a sort of possibly an engineering problem with regards to pipe. But they've also talked about a package treatment plant, which there's no provision for as far as I can see from the drawings, and brings its own concerns because looking at the site, it's a very wet site. There's a lot of ponds, and so how package treatment plant would fit into that site could be difficult. So what sort of condition are we going to put on? Anglia Water have asked for, a strategic foul water strategy. Is that the condition we're going to put on, or? It's on page 20.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think the condition, I've included that verbatim, and I think that if you were happy with accepting that approach, that would be the condition that we would impose unaltered, as recommended by Anglian Water themselves. As I say, my clear understanding is that there is a foul sewer that you can connect to. That's why there's been no discussion thus far about packaged treatment plants and where they would possibly go on site. This condition would enable that to be, in effect, bottomed out, a strategy to be provided, and then for connection to the foul sewer, and that would be the preferred means of foul sewage. If, for whatever reason, they can't discharge that condition satisfactorily, then I think at that stage they would have to look at an alternative means of dealing with foul sewage. Having said that, that means that no development, the way the condition is termed, no development can take place until that is actually bottomed out anyway. But as far as I can offer certainty at this point, my clear understanding is that there is foul sewer connection available that can be connected to. And up until this point, bearing in mind that the application hasn't changed significantly, Anglian Water weren't raising an objection. So I'm not entirely sure myself what's prompted this objection, but I've again noted that they've suggested a condition anyway, so I think that that's why I'm making the we're making the recommendation we're making.
So that's the condition we'll put in. Thank you.
Councillor Overett.
Yeah, I do still have a few questions. I noted earlier maps on the web indicate the short path section that you can see on the diagrams in your slides, I think starting with slide 6, has got like a little spur on the east side. It's described in maps on the web. I think the most recent one is the 26th of January 23 as access for future development. And I just wanted to be sure that if we do approve this application, it in no way indicates any approval in principle to future development, as is stated in those diagrams, and they're not described as superseded. They are on the web as they stand.
Well, certainly on the principle, you're certainly being asked to consider what's in front of you at this point.
Which includes an access to future development, that's why.
Well, I think that if I get a... Sorry, you can get a... Are you able to say which slide that was on? Sorry, Councillor, so I can just...
So slide 6, I think, where you start getting the site outlines, you get the little access spur, which is specifically described in earlier non-superseded maps as being access to future development. Halfway down on the right. That's it.
That point there. That would, well, in terms of the detail that's on that drawing, that would be the shared path leading down to the converted dwelling here, the converted barn. That wouldn't be a physical element on the ground. That would be green. There wouldn't be anything physically engineered at that point, because the engineered element of it is this access going down the side here. So I think that is an indication of where the land ownership ends on that side, but I don't think there'll be any physical demarcation there, such as a road or anything like that, as I read that drawing.
With the map on the web, which has not been superseded, specifically says that little spur sticking out exactly where your red pointer was, yeah. Access to future development. Just wanting to make sure we're not approving access to future development in principle. Hopefully not.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, and I think in the event you were minded to approve, I think that would be either a condition or an informative to make that absolutely clear. I haven't mentioned that because it's not because I've chosen not to, but it's just it's not a consideration at this point. But to make absolutely clear to the applicant, I think, you know, if there was a concern, committee had a concern about that point, we could certainly raise that via any notice. But you're not being asked to consider an application or further development at this point, at this stage anyway. But I take the point. And
linked to that, is that okay? Could I just also say, if we don't, as you said, we don't know what's going to be happening with the neighbourhood plan. We don't necessarily know where government is going with planning in the longer term and what have you. And if further development was agreed at any future point on this site, we would then be at quite high numbers across the whole site for the properties. So it would be way over probably 70 dwellings in total. And I just wonder if we could in any way request or express a preference for...
Councillor Overett, we can't really discuss about what's going to happen in the future about possible things. That we're just here today to do what's in front of us.
I just wanted to combine the two to make sure we had transport policies in place or something like that.
That's for another day, really.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I do, I'm so sorry.
Okay, it's absolutely fine.
Okay. I just wanted to question the private road quality just to ensure that it was adequate for wheelchairs and cyclists and pedestrians. And that I think that is really important, that they should be. I think the Mid Suffolk Disability Forum specifically requests for all roads to be firm, durable, level, no loose gravel, cobbles or uneven sets. And it would be good to have some more detail on that potentially.
Well, as I've said, it's not the proposal that it should be offered for adoption, but in terms of one of the key elements is the permeability of the site, as I've explained, as part of the surface water. So the treatment of surfaces would have to be able to accept the traffic that they would footpaths and carriageways, regardless. Obviously, they need to do a job if they're not adopted, if they are adopted or not. But I think the other point to bear in mind is that the travelling location, also the direction of travel of drainage, means that there's got to be permeability in the surfaces to enable the water to follow that route down to the end. So in other words, the permeability will be one of the elements that's considered as part of the appropriateness of the materials. But certainly in terms of the level, robust and things like that, so you can push a wheelchair on there or get access.
Yes, we have been caught out with that recently where we weren't clear enough, as I understand it. So
yeah,
just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Elkin.
Just another quick one about the affordability of the management fees. I think you mentioned they're using crates because of the drainage problems on the site. So would kind of periodically cleaning those out, that would presumably also be part of the management cost. And also there's quite a bit of land to the side. Is the management of that land also under that management charge? And the play area, so that's all bundled together.
With regard to the LAP, the local area of play, there is provision made for one, but the legal agreement would require that doesn't become private as part of the development, so the public would still be able to access it. In other words, you wouldn't have to live on that particular housing area in order to use that play area. It would be public in perpetuity. But the actual maintenance of all the features that you've mentioned, including the play equipment, would be under the management scheme.
It's brief. Gemma wants to come in and say something.
Yeah, thank you. I was just checking before I chipped in because I was aware there's been some updates to law, and this is outside planning law, but just hopefully a little bit more information. There is a Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act of 2024 which strengthens rights in terms of payment of estate management fees. It gives owners the right to challenge unreasonable service charges. It gives people the right to appoint a new estate manager if you as a homeowner group get together. So there have been new rights that have come up about that for homeowners. It is separate. There is not a lot we can do about it, but hopefully it gives some reassurance that there are other provisions that are coming up. I think we've been experiencing this for a little while, knowing that the management fees are coming up. It does seem to be an area where legislation is being focused gradually, so there are some more controls over that one. But yeah, just a little bit more information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, hello. I was asking a question about the footpath and the crossing that you mentioned, a new crossing that's being made, and how wide the existing footpath is, because currently it looks more like a sort of rural road. It's on the outskirts and then joins into the edge of the village, into Stradbroke, Queen Street. And therefore, if there were pedestrians, i.e. children, wheelchairs, cyclists, will it be equivalent or modernised and made up to the standard of the new development one? Is that something that's...
Thank you, Councillor. The requirement of the Highway Authority is that the access is provided with a footpath up to current standard coming out of the Bell Mouth In fact, you've got the, I'll use the... This show, if you follow my dot, that's the footpath coming round to that point, and then the provision of the crossing itself. To be absolutely clear, there's no provision to do anything to this side. It's to provide that crossing and that element of footpath. So, to answer your question, no, there is nothing to do to the south-west side of Queen Street footpath.
Are there any other questions for the officer? Councillor Pratchett.
Sorry, a very quick one. Just on, I think we've asked this on previous developments. Because obviously these plans were in quite some time ago and we've had the changes to simpler recycling since, have the kind of the bin storage areas been amended to receive the extra bins that were provided for the extra services? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. We've had various iterations of plans, as you say. The latest plan, I think, was late last year in terms of the layout, and that went out to reconsultation with consultees. And our waste services team haven't objected, so I think they're content with the access provision for their refuse freighters, etc.
Are there any other questions for the officer? Okay, so we're going to move on over to the public speakers now to address the committee. And in first, we've got Stradbroke Parish Council. We've got Odile Vladen here. So if you'd like to turn your microphone on, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll make it brief and then I'll answer any questions you have. This site was originally brought forward as a rural exception site and given outline permission, and that is the reason it was included in the Stradbroke Neighbourhood Plan. And the councillors were advised to put it in the plan so that they could keep control of the site and ensure that all elements of the rural exception site were maintained. This is why the parish council is most particularly concerned about the management fee on this site in particular. All sites have management fees, but this one, that the affordable housing should always remain affordable, because originally it should have been social housing as it was a rural exception site. As far as the footway is concerned, it was shown in this application, in an original iteration of the plan, that there was a footpath connection to Grove End. That would have satisfied Strad 8. Unfortunately, that footway was then taken away on a different iteration of the plan, which means that the zebra crossing will only benefit and is only required for this site. If this site wasn't coming forward, that zebra crossing wouldn't be required. It is required because the B1118 is on the lorry route and is a busy road, and therefore it is required, as there is no footway on that side of Queen Street. This was not a popular site. It was not popular in 2014. It went through on one vote, I believe, which is why the parish council decided to include it and control it in the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan is under review at the moment, is all I'll say on that. So as far as the parish council is concerned, the main areas of concern were that the management fees could become so high in the future to render the affordables no longer affordable, and therefore that would be unacceptable to the parish council, because these affordables need to be affordable, because it was a rural exception site at the time, and we are concerned that Strad 8 hasn't been fulfilled, because there is no other benefit to anybody else in the village apart from the people who will live in houses that aren't there at the moment, if that makes sense. So, but it is in our neighbourhood plan, and we do support development on that site, but the right sort of development. So you were correct, if the roads were built to adoptable standards, if the site was smaller and didn't have to maybe accommodate all of the flood issues, then perhaps the roads could be built to adoptable standard and the management fee would be less. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the parish clerk? Councillor Harding.
In your view, is there a practicable means of providing access to Grove End?
Well, there was a footpath shown on one of the maps. There's a link at the back, and whoever owns the land, we don't know if it's Mid Suffolk. Nobody. I mean, this has been under consideration for 3 or 4 years. Somebody somewhere could have had a discussion with somebody and said, can we put a footpath through to Grove End? I don't know if it's owned by Mid Suffolk or a housing association, but there is a facility to put a footpath. There is a piece of open space there that could. But nobody seems to have asked that question of anybody.
It feels like a strong point to me because you've got housing to the north there which don't have access to a pavement. So it seems like a no-brainer, really.
Well, the footpath would allow the people in Grove End to walk through the estate and then use the zebra crossing, which they can't. They don't have a crossing point. They have to use an uncontrolled crossing at West Hall to get across the B118.
Are there any other questions for the Parish Council? Councillor Pratchett.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Warboys did refer to this as a wet site because there's existing ponds, and then you've got the moat that's obviously that borders the site from the listed building. In your sort of local knowledge, would you regard this as an area a site that is susceptible to sort of receiving a lot of groundwater, or does it drain away quite nicely?
There is an area of the site that's locally known as Water Meadows.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so we haven't got any objectors or any supporters, but we do have the agent, Phil Cobbold. So if you'd like to start, and I'll time you 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. As you've heard, the application site is allocated for residential development in the neighbourhood plan. The allocation in the neighbourhood plan followed the granting of planning permission for 44 dwellings on the site in March 2014. So consequently, the principle of residential development on this site is long established. Over the course of the application, which was submitted in 2021, the applicants have endured numerous delays but continue to work very closely with the 5 different planning officers who've dealt with this application to meet all of the criteria of policy Strad 19 and to produce a higher quality scheme than was previously approved. As you've heard, none of the consultees have objected except from Anglian Water and the Parish Council. The applicants have attended numerous Parish Council meetings and corresponded with the Council to try and resolve their concerns. Firstly, the service and maintenance charges for the management company, which will maintain the unadopted roads and areas of open space, etc., will not render the affordable homes unaffordable. 2 housing associations are aware of the service and maintenance charges and consider them to be acceptable and have confirmed they will make an offer for the affordable homes if permission is granted. The site was not originally approved for 100% affordable homes as a rural exception site, and the housing allocation remains in force despite the previous permission lapsing. This scheme provides 35% affordable homes which are spread across the site, and these consist of 10 affordable rented and 5 shared ownership. The scheme provides almost £750,000 in infrastructure contributions, which is almost twice that of the previous scheme. It also provides 35% biodiversity net gain within the site and 98% BNG along the site boundaries. The scheme also includes a play area which is not in the previous approval. The applicants have explored the possibility of a footpath link from the development to Grove End, but this could not be provided as third-party consent could not be obtained. The neighbourhood plan policy states that links will be encouraged where possible, but in this case it isn't possible. The proposal includes a range of energy efficiency measures, including solar panels, air source heat pumps, EV charging points and water butts for all properties. With regards to the Anglian Water's recent objection, well, they would have been consulted on capacity when the site was originally proposed for allocation in the neighbourhood plan, and they did not object at that stage. Furthermore, they previously confirmed in December 23 via a pre-development inquiry that the sewage system had available capacity. As you've heard, they have a statutory duty to ensure that there is capacity at the water recycling centre, and they predict the future growth to inform their asset management plan by reviewing the allocated sites within the development plans. If Anglian Water have given this allocation to another development, then it is their error for which the applicant should not be penalised. Nevertheless, if connection is not achievable, then other sources of drainage such as treatment plants could be installed. But as you've heard, Anglian Water have accepted that this is a matter which could be dealt with by a Grampian condition. I hope you'll agree that this scheme provides economic, social and environmental benefits for the local community and that you'll endorse the officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Much. Is there any questions for the agent? Councillor Elkin.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you were not able to secure the footpath through. I just wondered if you could explain what steps have been taken to try to do that.
Well, the applicant has been in contact with the landowner because the applicant doesn't own the land all the way down to Grove End. So there's another third party involved and they've not been prepared so far to give their consent for that connection to be made.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, have you spoken to any of the individual landowners to see if they would sell a strip of land, or has that not been thought of?
In terms of the footpath,
it's a stretch of residential gardens, and you'd have to. I don't think it would provide the necessary, width or provision to kind of go between two semi-detached properties or something like that. I don't think there's any suitable connection point as part of that.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Any other questions? So, Councillor Overett, did you have your hand up?
Mine was the same question in relation to the pathway.
So, are there any other questions for the agent? Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. As has been mentioned, it's obviously a really wet site. If I've understood correctly, you're filling in a pond and building on top of that. Obviously, we're not flood experts in the room, but I just wondered if you had any concerns about people being able to insure these properties if they're at risk of groundwater flooding.
So I'm not a flood expert either, but the people who are flood experts are content that the strategic drainage system that's proposed will work. And in my experience, it's often very difficult to get approval from the local lead flood authority on these sorts of schemes, but on this one they are content. So on that basis, if the experts are happy with it, then we see no reason to question the experts.
Are there any other questions? So moving on, we have Councillor Linda is not here, but I have an email statement from him which I will read out. He's the ward member. The application for the development at Grove Farm has been rolling along for a number of years. I've studied documents dealing with the matter and also been in touch personally with Brad Hefford, the officer handling this application. I've also met with the applicant and listened in discussions carried out at Stradbroke Parish Council. Initially, I did have a concern regarding the possibility of sewage water being mixed up with surface water, but that concern is no longer at hand. Thus, I do recommend that this application is granted subject to conditions, notably the one highlighted by officers dealing with the issues of water discharge. Thank you. So that is everyone we need to hear from, so we can now move to debate. So I will open up the item for debate, and who would like to go first? Councillor Hardingham, thank you very much.
Well, I will kick off. It's more of an observation than anything else, really, which is that we've got a number of houses with 3 PV panels, which is all well and good, but it seems to me it's just a token gesture. And if we're really making a contribution to sustainable development, then there's not much point putting 3 panels on a house. You might as well put 5 or 6. I imagine that the roofs are big enough for that, because 3 panels is really not very much and will make practically no contribution to heating the house through the air source heat pump during the spring and autumn. So I think it's just an observation really for colleagues about how we might be able to push for more meaningful sustainability measures. Thank you.
Councillor Patch.
Thank you, Chair. So I think, you know, this has come to us as a derelict farm site. It had previous planning permission in 2014, so sort of precedent, you know, has kind of already been set. So I think, you know, I'd like to propose we do recommend for approval, but again, echoing Councillor Hardingham's points, and again, perhaps if we can help out these affordable houses, because we're afraid of the service charges, is there a way that the applicant would maybe increase the amount of solar panels, particularly on the affordable housing, to actually make them sort of truly affordable, and perhaps the extra sort of energy that is coming in from the panels can slightly mitigate against the service charges that they need to pay, and then we can truly say that these houses are affordable. So I will recommend for approval, and that we allow the planning officers to work on the conditions with the applicants, but I would like them to bear in mind Councillor Hardingham's suggestion of increased PV. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pratchett. Gemma, is that something that, you know, that's within our gift?
I think that's no problem. I think it's worth asking the applicant and agent now. If that is a problem, then maybe we need to take another view. So if you're happy, Chair, if we can ask that question, that would... Sure.
Yeah, we were led by the economic environmental consultant on the number of PV panels, and we would certainly be open to increasing them if that was practical on the roofs. Certainly, yep.
That's fantastic. Okay, I've got a proposer here. Can I have is there a seconder? You're happy to second? Thank you. Now, would anyone else like to add to the debate? Councillor Elkin?
Yeah, just to say this one kind of concerns me a bit. It started as a rural exception site, and in theory, it's still in the neighbourhood plan. In theory, this should be really welcomed by the community, and the parish council are obviously not happy with it for various reasons. So, you know, it seems strange that those issues haven't been able to be worked out, that there are still problems as far as the community are concerned on a site that everyone should be happy is coming forward, and then they're not. So to me it feels like something isn't quite right here, and the fact that the flooding issue does worry me, because probably like others in this room, I have waded through floodwater to flooded houses on areas that are not at any flood risk. So, you know, I think some of that has to, not questioning the experts, but some of that has to be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt, and you don't want to put people who've gone out of their way to struggle to buy a home to be put in a position where every few winters when we get a bad storm, even if their home isn't flooding, they're having to wade through mucky floodwater to get in and out of their houses. So that really worries me. So yeah, I'm still thinking about it. You mentioned treatment plants. I don't think treatment plants, again, not an expert, but just live in a rural place where there are treatment plants and high levels of water table and groundwater. You end up with sewage pouring over the fields and into the ditches. They don't work in those sorts of situations. So I don't think that's a realistic possibility, just myself personally. And I know Anglian Water have to provide a connection, but I think it goes to Hoxton and I Recycling Centre, which, I mean, they have to provide a connection. That does overspill sewage. I think it was about 100 and something hours last time the records were showing, which isn't that high compared to some of them, but it's still more hours of sewage going into the River Dove than everyone would be prefer to see, I should think. So, yeah, I've definitely got some questions with this.
I will just say that there was only 4 objections written in, and also the ward member is in agreement. But anyway, we'll move on with the debate. Councillor Marriott.
I too am sort of worried about the possibility of flooding and also these possible electric outages, as I mentioned earlier. I do feel this has been going on for such a long time. I know it was the planning commission had run out. It was initially in 2016. It was actually granted, but I feel there's so many conditions attached to this, and surely in this vast amount of time that some of them could have been better addressed, including maybe issues related to footpaths. And it's sort of saying here from Place Services that there's a lack of detailed landscape information at this stage, and it could be secured by condition. But I think before coming to the Planning Committee, I think quite a lot of issues could have been better resolved. Thank you.
Councillor Hardingham. Sorry, Councillor Overett.
Yes, I do apologise. I had a brief mental block and I don't at this point feel willing to second the motion of approval. I do apologise for that error on my part. I suppose I feel as if, we are very constrained in the decisions that we make and that we can make in this situation, but there are a number of concerns that I do feel we need to have that space to discuss and debate and feel that we've properly covered before I'd be willing to second it. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that was willing to second the proposal?
I'm not sure.
We can continue to debate
Chair,
the matter.
Can I just, it was to make a comment really. I think in lots of ways this is a reasonable development in a reasonable location. I think with tweaking it could be a very good development, in particular the sort of additional photovoltaic cells and possible improvements to footpaths, but again the service charges needs to be resolved. I certainly would like to see as a condition Anglia Water's statement regarding the strategic whatever it is, foul water strategy. And it is quite unusual for Anglia Water to object to cite other grounds of capacity. My other concern is that as the ground isn't really suitable for a such scheme as such, that the discharge is going to go into any surplus is going to go into the nearby watercourse network. Now, I've tried to have a look at that, but from what I can see, it's just sort of meandering ditches, and it's very flat around Stradbroke, so these ditches just meander around, joining other ditches or just disappearing. These are well outside the red area, but I think that's, as Councillor Elkin mentioned, our water catchment area is very spread out, it's very diverse, and I think we need to look at how additional discharges go into that network and add to the stresses on that system. I'm not sure how that could be conditioned as to whether, because it would be a bit more investigative into the wider watercourse network, which may well be well maintained.
Would anyone else like to add to the debate? I'm happy to second the proposal, so that can sort of move on, but we do need to debate, if the people aren't happy, any matters that are concerning the councillors. Councillor Hardingham.
Well, I'll just add, I don't think we have strong enough ground to turn this one down, but nevertheless, I think we ought to put it on record that there are, there are issues, aspects of it that we're not satisfied with, and that, as Councillor Marriott said, it should perhaps have been addressed more fully before it came to us, in particular the questions of access and getting this Anglian water issue out of the way. Thank you.
So is there any extra things that we could ask for Gemma's advice on, apart from the solar PV panels, which could be increased, which their agents are happy to do? But is there any other conditions that we would like to, add that are within our gift that we can to make people happy about this? Gemma, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, if I could pick up just a couple of points maybe that have come up in conversation. I think that the footpath is something that is beyond our gift, certainly in terms of conditions. Unfortunately, if we have got an intervening landowner, that is essentially being held hostage to it and is outside of our control to add that condition on. In terms of the flood and water, as Bradley mentioned, that has gone through our experts at Suffolk County Council who look into that and give advice. That they are saying they're content with putting the conditions on that they've specifically requested. I totally appreciate the concern given what we've experienced, but I think from a planning point of view, some of those developments were granted before any of those surface water drainage treatments were thought of. We've now moved a long way forward from there. The new ones that are being built do capture and hold their own water. They're designed to do that and to let it out gradually after the storm event has passed. You can't ever foolproof something, but that is what the scheme is designed to do. So I think in terms of surface water drainage and the strategy and the SUDs, that is all designed to capture and hold that water and help in a flood event as opposed to cause more issues on that one. So again, I think those conditions are included. The only thing we perhaps haven't covered, and Bradley might have to tell me if I've missed it, was whether the M42 conditions were something members wanted to add. But I'll take that to proposer and seconder, or maybe Bradley, is it already included and I've missed it? Just check that first.
By way of clarification, it's a commitment, but it's not conditioned, so we could add that condition as well.
Thanks. Councillor Elkin.
It was just a question. I appreciate we can't have a condition relating to the footpath because it's out of the red line area, but could we request that maybe the applicant and the parish council sit down together and discuss it, because obviously there's very different views about whether that's not as a condition, but just to say, would you be willing to revisit and just have one last try and see if something can be done?
I don't think we can do more than say it in this forum, but everybody is here and present, and is often the case. We'll take on those points and see what they can do, but that would probably be as far as I think we could go, and I think that was an agreement from Ian as well. Chair.
Would anyone else like to say anything else? Okay, I will ask who am I going to ask? The governance officer to conduct a vote, which will be by a show of hands.
Do you want to go through?
Would you mind, Chair, if I just ran through that, because I appreciate that there was a bit from late papers. So we're looking at approval as the recommendation on pages 26 to 27 with the update from late papers, which is the Anglian Waterfowl Strategy condition to confirm that the early years contribution is £176,132, that the highway condition for the bus stop is now in lieu of the contribution that was listed, and additional conditions for the additional solar panels to affordable housing, and that the M42 properties are to be provided. Hopefully that covers everything yourself and the proposer.
Okay, I will now ask the governance officer to conduct a handheld vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sorry. All those against? Thank you. So that's 5 votes for and 3 against. Therefore, that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, just looking at the time, is anyone desperate for a break? Okay, well, we'll have a 5-minute break for, and then we'll be back here at 10 past at 11. Right. Continuing on with item 7B, DC/24/05535, land south of I Airfield Industrial Estate, Castleton Way, Yaxley, Suffolk. I now invite Bron Curtis to introduce the application to the committee. Hello, Bron. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair, members. Thank you very much. I'll just share the presentation with you. Okay, so the application is for a battery energy storage system development on land to the southern end of the I Airfield. And you can see the orange line here is rather large compared to the area of development that you'll see in a moment. That's because this also includes a route for cable connection to the point of connection, which is the Yaxley substation, and temporary access for construction to the substation as well. This is the red line in a little bit more context with you can see parts of the southern end of the I Airfield. You can also see where parts of Yaxley Village are and the A140 in the middle there. Constraints plan gives that a bit more context. So the A140 in the solid green line, you can see rights of way, the nearest being Rapsy Tapsy Lane, which is just to the south of Castleton Way over here, and there's another right of way further to the east here, which then leads through the industrial estate. And you can see the main part of the start of the main part of Yaxley Village on the other side of the 140, with a number of listed buildings over there. But you can see that the site itself is relatively free of the main constraints that you're used to seeing. This plan shows the swathe for the high pressure gas pipeline, which links to the compressor station on the airfield. The gas pipeline, which is operated by National Gas, is buried approximately 1.1 metres below the level of the land where the application site is. But you can see the application site sits directly above the pipeline route. You can also see on this image the proximity of the site to the town of Eye. Although it's in the parish of Yaxley, it is also pretty close to Eye, and you can see the Hartismere High School, which is further along Castleton Way, and the new Persimmon development, which is not showing on this plan but is in this area here. This is the layout of the main complex for the battery storage. So this doesn't include the cable routing and the connection to the Yaxley substation, but this is the main part of the development. So this looks very similar to other battery developments that the committee have considered previously, with a series of pieces of equipment, including shipping container type structures for the battery units and twin skid units, inverters, the substation building, and then some transformer equipment as well. You can see that there are proposed to be some attenuation basins for the management of surface water. There's also proposed to be firefighting water tanks, storage of firefighting water, which would be tankered in from outside of the Hartismere moratorium exclusion zone. And you can also see some of the indicative areas for landscaping around the site. Also shown on this plan, you've got the main access which exists Castleton Way leading to Potash Lane, which is this southern part of the runway, then leading onto the old runway. So an access leading off Potash Lane here into the hard standings and internal roadways to serve the development, but also a secondary emergency access from Castleton Way in the centre there. So just showing that in context with the whole of the red line. And a bit more detail here for some landscapes. So you can see there's areas of planted bunding proposed, as well as some other tree, hedge and grassland planting and the attenuation basins. Just run you through some slides which show indicative equipment. So we've got battery containers, substation building, which is 4.8 metres high. Battery containers are 3.2. This is the transformer units, which are 5 something. Okay, where did I put that? Come back to that in a second. Auxiliary transformer, LV cabinet, So it's all fairly standard pieces of electrical equipment that are similar for these sorts of developments. And then CCTV column poles with sensor lighting, they're 5 metres high. And the water tank. It is proposed to enclose the site with 3-metre palisade fencing. Palisade fencing is not unusual in this location. There's quite a lot of palisade fencing already around the industrial operations on the airfield. But having spoken to the applicant, they are willing to use an alternative, which is fine gauge wire mesh fencing, which is similar to the fencing that the committee considered at your last meeting for the Clearstone battery. And that was approved there. So what's being proposed here is palisade, but there is the option for an alternative, which we can control by condition if members prefer that. This is just an example of what an installation looks like. This is one of the applicant's other installations, which is already operational. And you can see an example here of palisade fencing at the bottom and a CCTV pole with the CCTV cameras and the sensor lighting, just as an example of what that would look like. So running you through the photographs for the application site. This is taken from Castleton Way, close to the access point onto Potash Lane. And you can just see the access Potash Lane there. And then turning around, you can then see the access point into the application site, which is agricultural land, fairly scrubby, or has obviously more recently been turned over for some investigation works, etc. But there's not really much on the site at the moment. It's fairly open. It's fairly high elevated plateau landscape in this part of the district. So there are some open views from the rights-of-way network and from the highway. This is at the eastern end of the site from Castleton Way, looking towards the northwest. So you can see the turbines there that are on the airfield. And just in the middle background, you can see some of the other industrial buildings. And then coming further along Castleton Way to the west, so again looking northwest, you can see bits of the Cranswick buildings. And there's some of the other Roy Humphreys buildings in the background and the turbines. And this is the approximate location of the secondary emergency access from Castleton Way, again looking sort of northwest. Looking directly north. And then this is from Rapsy Tapsy Lane, so this is the nearest public right-of-way looking towards the site. You can see the tree cover along this part of Castleton Way is a little bit more mature and dense, so there's not really much, you can't really see any of the site from this point. That is the end of the slides. So just to run you through the details of the proposal, it is very similar in nature to battery developments that you've seen before. There have been concerns, the main concern with this proposal concerns about surface water drainage, which we know is an existing issue for the area around Airfield. Landscape and visual impact is a big concern for these developments, particularly the industrial design of them. But public safety and health, particularly in the event of an emergency incident, is a significant concern, which we're seeing with all of these types of proposal. In terms of the information that the applicant has submitted, they've provided documents to demonstrate things like noise impact, so demonstrating that the noise impact of operation of the development would be below background noise. There's no issue there that would warrant refusal of the application. Landscape impacts, whilst there are some issues and there is some tension with your policy which requires the protection and enhancement of the landscape, there is obviously the context of the airfield and the other industrial developments that are in the background of this site. So that is limited, and overall your landscape officer is advising no objection with a series of conditions to ensure as much mitigation as possible. The land is grade 3A, best and most versatile agricultural land. So there is also some tension with your policy LP15, which seeks to avoid BMV where possible. But as part of the application, an alternative sites assessment has been submitted, which demonstrates that the alternative options are all likely to be on BMV, and the one option that is within scope of being practical that is not BMV is very close to residential properties, so is likely to have a worse outcome on that score. In terms of alternative sites, there are no heritage assets within the site itself or within the directly immediate area in terms of listed buildings, but there are non-designated assets, and because of the open plateau landscape, your heritage officer advises that the site could be within the setting of some designated assets that are further afield. So to make sure that we're compliant with policy, an alternative sites assessment also considers the requirements of LP25 in that respect, and similarly concludes that the alternatives that are available would have a similar impact on the setting of designated and undesignated assets, so that there's no better option in heritage terms. The heritage impact is considered to be a very low level of less than substantial harm, and you can see in your report that I've concluded that the significant public benefits and the thrust of government policy in terms of the Clean Power Action Plan, etc., outweigh the harm in heritage terms. So we are satisfied on the statutory requirements in that respect. In terms of the safety element then, the applicant has been in liaison with the operators of the other critical national infrastructure that's in the area, so National Grid, Drax, who operate the Progress Power gas-fired power station, and National Gas, who operate the gas pipeline and the compressor station. And there has been a series of discussion through the application, which you can see in the application documents, but now all of those operators are satisfied that the development can operate safely without impacting the safe operation of their own installations, subject to some conditions that are being dealt with there. And Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service are now a consultee as required by the planning practice guidance. They have been consulted. There is an outline safety and emergency response plan as part of the application. So you'll see that they have commented on that it looks as though it is likely to be able to comply with the National Fire Chiefs Council's guidance, and that they are willing to work with the applicant to secure a final version of that to ensure safe operation of the development. So the recommendation that's before you includes a condition to ensure that that happens, but also, as we have done with previous developments, to ensure that that is reviewed on an annual basis to take account of all changes in technology and guidance to ensure the development is continuing to be operated in the safest manner and having regard to all of the latest information that's available. In surface water, there is a drainage strategy that's been submitted. The lead local flood authority is satisfied with that. The proposal is to use the attenuation basins, as I've said, to ensure that the runoff rate is no greater than existing, with a controlled discharge into the drainage ditch, which is on the southern boundary. That, I think, is a very quick run through of all of the main facts of the application. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Is there anyone that would like to ask Bron a question? Councillor Pratchett.
Thank you, Chair. Would it not make sense with, obviously, all of the parishes are unanimous that they're concerned about surface water. So would it not make sense that the attenuation basin and the tank to subdue the heat from the potential fires are the one and the same thing? Could you not just have a much larger basin lagoon that both receives rainwater but uses that rainwater instead of the shipped in water? So, right, is it proposed to have two separate tanks, is what I'm saying? Is it not just best to have the one?
So it is proposed to have a water tank which has the capacity required in the event of an incident available on site at all times, which is separate to the attenuation basins because the attenuations may run dry. So there is no guarantee of the level of rainfall that the attenuation basins will hold. Anytime they're not intended to be full at all times as a pond, they're intended to manage the runoff surface water. But I'm sure the applicant will be able to give you more detail on that if you would like to ask them.
Happy to ask later.
Happy to ask later.
Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. Ron, you mentioned that it complies with the National Fire Chiefs guidance, which I think is being updated with new guidance coming out this year. So do we know which guidance it will conform to as this project is going along? I know the technology is changing all the time, the guidance is changing. I think the guidance is looking at distance from residential sites. So yeah, I just wondered which one it's going to conform to.
So the current guidance is the 2023 version. The 2024 version, which was part of the consultation last year, is expected to be published as full guidance shortly, but we don't have a definite date for that. So the condition in your recommendation ensures that the emergency response and safety plan accords with the latest guidance, whether that be from the National Fire Chiefs Council or anything else that we get from central government on battery safety, because it is an ongoing conversation at a national level, and there is a lot of concern about the number of developments and the high speed of rollout and the evolution of tech, and also there's been some incidents lately. So there's likely to be more guidance as we go along. So that condition makes sure that we're not fixed to one thing, but it's flexible enough to take into account whatever's the latest. And that will all be under the advice of the Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service. So they will be able to let us know if there's anything else that should be adhered to.
Yeah, is that all right? Yeah, it's just, I'm sort of not quite sure how that works. If the guidance says suddenly they've got to have extra 2 metres between units or something, and they're halfway through building it, you know, at some point they've got to pick a lane. But my question was, my second question was about the if they're in the event of a fire. I know the new housing at the Persimmon site and the high school are, I think, about 450 metres away, something like that. I think the current guidance says ideally these sites should be residential sites should be upwind of a BESS if possible, sort of basically out of the wind direction. But even though it's a few hundred metres, it's quite a windy site. Anything toxic that comes out of that in a fire would reach the school and the housing in, you know, a couple of minutes on a windy day. So I was wondering if we could ask for a condition that, as well as reviewing their own emergency response plans every year, they could consult with the town council and the high school particularly to make sure that those two organisations are including it in their own emergency response plans, because if you've got to round up 1,000 children and get them indoors in a couple of minutes, that's obviously something the school's going to have to take into consideration. Sorry, that was a really long question, but can we ask them to liaise with the town council and the school in terms of emergency response?
Yes, I don't think that's unreasonable. And just to confirm that the prevailing wind in this area is from the southwest. I know that because we had it modelled for the wind turbine applications some years ago. So I'm just showing you the map, the aerial map here, so that you can see where the site is in relation to the residential properties, the Persimmon development there. So yeah, the prevailing wind is from the southwest that way. So the school, which is there, is out of that direction. It's not downwind necessarily, but it's not within the direction of the prevailing wind. But yes, it wouldn't be unreasonable to include other partners in liaison in terms of emergency response.
Thank you.
Councillor Marriott.
Both I Town Clerk and Thranderson Parish Clerk comment that culverts are inadequate. Is anything being done to improve this?
So the culverts are an ordinary watercourse, which falls under the responsibility of Suffolk County Council as the lead local flood authority. They have been doing some work following Storm Babette and other incidents in the last couple of years, where they've been reaching out to the landowners who are responsible for the culverts. So just to clarify, whilst the overseeing of ordinary watercourses falls within the jurisdiction of Suffolk County Council, the duty to maintain them usually falls with the riparian owner, that is the landowner on which the ditch falls, and where there are two landowners adjoining, then that can be shared. So they have been reaching out to landowners to remind them of their responsibilities to maintain watercourses. And they have been consulted as part of this application, and they've confirmed that the surface water drainage management strategy is acceptable.
Thank you. Could I just another question about the comments from the County Council Highways. They're saying the access to Yaxley substation is due to be removed, and Leys Lane is not suitable for more traffic. I just wonder how was that got over? What was being done about that?
Okay, so on the screen at the moment, oh sorry, I've lost my pointer. Here we go. This wiggling orange line is the temporary access that was granted consent for the construction of Yaxley substation as part of the wider development consent order for the Progress Power station. That still exists because there's still some bits happening at the substation, which is over here, and that access point is also being used by other developers who are looking to construct close to substation. So this application includes that access way for the construction here. So you can see that it doesn't include Lees Lane as a point of access for construction, but it does include this temporary access. However, your officers and Suffolk County Council officers are aware that that is a temporary access and that there is a requirement on the DCO, Development Consent Order, and a condition on the planning permission for the synchronous condenser, which you may remember from a couple of years ago, for that to be reinstated, to be removed and reinstated. So officers are working with all of the relevant operators to find an appropriate alternative that does not rely on Lees Lane, recognising that Lees Lane is not appropriate for construction traffic or operational traffic of any volume, really. It's very narrow. It's really only appropriate to be used by the people who live at the end of it and as the designated right-of-way that is. So it's a piece of work that's ongoing. However, what you're being asked to consider today is the use of the existing temporary access by this developer to do their cable work.
Are there any other questions for the case officer? Councillor Pratchett.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just confirm how many holding objections we've got currently on this? How many from the official consultees, how many objectors do we have at the moment?
There's no outstanding holding objections. There is, on Great Crested Newts, there is a piece of work that is still ongoing with the applicant providing some further information that your ecologist needs in order to advise the council that we've met our statutory duties in terms of protected species, which is why you'll see your recommendation is a bit long-winded, because it's asking you to resolve a minded to position today, subject to the resolution of that Great Crested Newt. We have actually had that information this morning. It's currently with your ecologist. If the advice from the ecologist comes back anytime soon, I'll let Gemma know so that we can update you. It's looking like we can get there. We just need to have all of the relevant paperwork and information before us so that we can demonstrate that we've met our statutory duties. So that is not, I suppose that's technically a holding objection because it's not everything that's satisfied yet to make a decision, but you can still make the resolution. I've cleared that with the ecologist. So other than that, there's none.
Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got 3 points to raise, really. The first one was the skylark mitigation, which I see is conditioned for 10 years. But the battery storage site is applying for permission for 40 years. Is there any reason why skylarks shouldn't still be considered important in 11 years' time and 25 years' time when they're important for the first 10? So if we could deal with that one.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to just double check this with the ecologist, but my understanding is that because of the nature of skylark nesting, once they've been displaced for that amount of time, they won't be coming back to seek plots on the application site. So 10 years is consistent with other conditions of this nature that have been imposed through appeal decisions, etc. elsewhere. So it meets the tests of reasonableness for the condition without us needing to extend it any longer. But I will double check that and with the advice from the ecologist to see if we need it to be any longer. But that's my understanding, that once they've gone somewhere else, they'll just keep going back to the somewhere else plots rather than coming back to this site.
Yes, I must confess I don't follow that one. Having gone somewhere else, they need to still have that somewhere else to go to. But be that as it may. Another point that was raised was a community benefit fund I saw mentioned. Is there any proposal for a community benefit fund as a result of this application?
Community benefits are not a material planning consideration, so I haven't covered that in your report, and I would need to just double check the detail of that by looking through the file, but that will be something the applicant can answer very quickly, no doubt, because they'll have that information handy, so that might be best put to them if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, and the fine point was that I did see in a landscape, I think it was a landscape book, about significant trees should be retained, which obviously were going to be cut down. Has that one been resolved to the satisfaction of place services and so on?
That has now, yes. Your arboricultural officer, you've got in your papers, I will just find you where it is, bear with me a second. Arboricultural officer has now removed his holding objection and confirms, so they've been able to make some changes on that score, and we're now satisfied on that point. Bear with me a second, I'll find you where. Okay, so you're page 34. 34, yeah. The arboricultural officer now confirms there's no objection, and that was after the original comment that they made about the loss of significant trees and that those should be retained. So the further information that was submitted addressed that and a number of other points and shows that those can now be retained.
Thank you. Yes, I missed that one.
Councillor Overett.
Thank you. Yeah, I wondered, is there any precedent for batteries of this kind to be positioned so close to a high-pressure gas pipeline, and have there been any issues arising? I think just talking about training the local school to get all their children indoors within a couple of minutes to avoid toxic fume poisoning is quite serious stuff, and I'm not sure it's a school I'd want to send my children to. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to confirm that in your tabled papers, there is a response from Field regarding the concerns that have been raised about the proximity with the gas pipeline. And when there is discussion around toxic fumes, that is not as a result of any interaction with the gas pipeline. So the gas pipeline is buried 1.1 metre below the ground. The site is outside the exclusion zone for safety for the national gas operation, and National Gas have confirmed that they are satisfied that the development can go ahead and ensure the safety of their operation. But there is a risk of incident with batteries, that's known, and there have been reported incidents. So the risk of toxic fumes is as a result of the incident itself rather than the interaction with a gas pipeline. So a fire within one of the units and the thermal runaway, and whether that would then result in any toxic fume. In terms of the precedent of battery developments being near a high pressure gas main, I'm not aware of any that are exactly the same as this. We do have developments that are near gas pipelines. We have them down near Bramford. The developer is probably going to be better placed to give you an idea of what goes on in the rest of the industry. I've only really got an idea of what goes on around the region, but they develop all over the country, and they will be in touch with other developers that have other installations. So there may be some information they can give you on that. Sorry.
Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. I think it mentioned that the site has enough water to fight a fire for a couple of hours, which I think is the standard requirement. And I think that's for cooling surrounding units rather than actually trying to put the fire out, because you can't. I just wondered what happens after the couple of hours, given that some of these fires can burn for days. Do they just keep using the same water? So that was one question. And the other question was where that water goes. I know there's a lined pond, but if they do need to bring in more water because there's a long running fire, does the lined pond get full at some point? I'm asking that because I think this whole site is on top of the aquifer for Eye and the surrounding area, so obviously we don't want anything horrible getting into the groundwater there.
Okay, thank you. So I understand the applicant's fire specialist is on this call and is probably best placed to answer the detail of your questions, but in general terms, the way that battery fire incidents are expected to behave is that they are left to burn out, so they don't require any water for firefighting in the sense that some other fires might be, remembering that they're an electrical installation, so they're kind of just left to do their thing. But as you say, the water is available on site for the cooling of surrounding vegetation to avoid spread to that land. In terms of the washdown, that goes into the attenuation basins, and if there is an incident, they have an automatic shut-off so that the outflow is closed, so that any potentially polluted washdown water is in the attenuation basin and can be tested and treated after the event if necessary. But I think it's probably better for the specialist to give you the detail of a response, if that's okay, please. Sorry, it's just that they will know far more about it than I do, having come from that professional background.
Thank you.
Councillor Overett.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry if I've missed this, but do we have an assurance that all lighting during construction and also the sensor lighting, once the construction is complete, will be wildlife friendly?
So that is on your page. Give me a second. So there is no external lighting other than that is required as sensor for the CCTV lighting. And that is to be controlled in your recommendation, condition 25. So there's actually to be no lighting rather than lighting to be wildlife friendly. And it's just for the CCTV, so sensors for that.
And during construction?
There's nothing proposed, so if they want to use lighting during construction, they'd have to come as a condition discharge.
Are there any other questions for Bron? I've got one actually, Bron, which is in the late papers. There's a green on the drawing thing. There's a green circle that says hazardous area drawing. What exactly is that?
That, bear with me a second, I believe you're on your table of papers, page 24, and that is the above ground installation as part of the, I believe that's part of the national gas installation. The applicant will be able to give it. That's not actually, there's not actually anything on the key for that, is there? On that drawing, so the applicant should be able to answer that question, sorry, with a bit more detail.
Okay, cool, thank you. Is there any other questions for Bron at all? Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. I think I saw that the part of the emergency response would include having to close Castleton Way, because I think it said about a 300-metre stretch would be within that. I can't remember how many metres it was, 60 metres or something, that you had to be distant if there is a fire. So I was just wondering, is that why they have the second access route? Because obviously that Castleton Way is one of the two key routes into the town of Eye for emergency services and everybody else.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to have a second access so that you can make sure that you can still get to the access for emergency response in the event that one access is not usable.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from Bron before we move on? Okay, I will now invite the public speakers to address the committee. From the parish councils, as the application site is located in more than one parish, each parish has 3 minutes to address the committee. First, we have Philip Freeman, who is the clerk for both Randleston and Yaxley parish councils. So first of all, can I please ask you to make your representation on behalf of Randleston first, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak both times. I'm representing both parish councils, but I'll try to avoid repetition as much as possible. So far, you've been looking at the view of the applicant. I'm concerned, and the parish council are concerned, with the views of the local people who are horrified by this application so close to the gas pipeline. And I think some of the things that Mr. Curtis has said don't give us any less cause for concern. There is a piecemeal development of solar farms and battery storage locally. This is now affecting North Suffolk detrimentally, which is an area of natural beauty. Now, we support renewable energy in principle, but we want a strategic plan to see how it is done. Any company at present appears to be able to arrive in the area, buy a piece of land and start another proposal. There is no strategy for this. This is quite frankly appalling. We're also in Thrandeston now going to be affected much more by the Norwich to Tilbury new electricity transmission connection, because it's going to be moved 700 metre closer to us, and that's going to adversely affect the village. And these factors contribute to a sense of siege and neglect amongst local residents. When will there be a strategic plan for a solar farm and battery storage? Just keep putting up these different locations is ludicrous. Despite the recommendations of the officer involved in this, which denies that local farmers are recording an increased number of incidents of flooding, I have evidence from local farmers, which has been filmed, to say that that is incorrect. And it should not fall on the farmers to be coping with the extra water which is caused by these runoff. Now, these battery storage units pose a huge risk, and I'm horrified, totally horrified, by the dismissal of the concern about what's going to happen at Hartersmere High School in one of these. Now, that is outside of Thrandeston, but children from Thrandeston will be going there. It is absolutely appalling that it is dismissed in such a casual way. Prevailing winds don't always blow from the same direction. I know that. I keep a lot of weather records. And to say that because it's southwest, it won't affect the school is just nonsense. If there is a fire, it will go on for time, and it cannot then just close the windows of the school and hope that it goes away. These are serious problems that need to be addressed, and this application is totally out of order in relation to local people and the impact that it potentially has on them.
Mr. Freeman, if you can just round up now, please. Your 3 minutes is finished.
I will do. Yeah. I have said really everything I want to say on this, other than there are going to be considerable issues with battery storage in the local area, because we know of at least 5 applications coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And does anyone have any particular questions regarding Thrandeston Parish Council? In which case, I'll ask you to go on with another 3 minutes for Yaxley Parish Council. Thank you.
Yeah, the first thing I would like to just mention on this, which is something that's come up during Miss Curtis's presentation, is the temporary access. Yaxley Parish Council has a ransom strip on this temporary access. We have not yet been approached about any future developments by either Field Yaxley or by the county council on this, or the planning people. The parish council has had 3 meetings with Field Yaxley and is not satisfied with the answers we've been given. They lack knowledge of the area. They lack knowledge, some of them, of the actual application, and even to the extent of confusing Yaxley and Suffolk with Yaxley and Cambridgeshire. The proximity of the site to the gas pipeline makes this application high risk, and the parish council agrees with the previous letter for the National Gas Transmission dated 24 December 2024, which states the area is a high-risk zone. I also have been made aware that it is an area that should not be flown over by aircraft. The site is in the wrong place. It should not be being considered so close to the gas pipeline. I believe there are pipes that come up from underground adjacent to the site for the battery storage, which could, in the case of a serious fire, be affected. Now, if those pipes go up, there could be a massive explosion, a massive backburn of pipe through the ground. This is just not acceptable, and I have heard 2 occasions that both Suffolk Fire and Rescue and Norfolk Fire and Rescue are neither trained, equipped or staffed to fight these types of fires. Now, whatever is said, this is what's coming out from those people. The other problem is this issue over water runoff, and the farmers and land owners, as I said previously, are being expected to pick up the cost of moving the water from my airfield, and this is unacceptable. Councillor Fleming is now trying to do something about this, and both Thranderson and Yaxley Parish Councils appreciate her efforts and support her in this. But we cannot constantly expect the landowners to pick up the pieces for water drainage from the airfield impermeable surfaces. This is nothing new, been going on for a long time. We need strategic plans to put people's minds at rest that this whole area is not going to become just a dumping ground for solar panels and battery storage. And local people, and if you look at the application, comments on it are extremely concerned about what is being planned in relation to this particular application and the gas pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Freeman or the Parish Council? Thank you very much. So we will move on. We don't have any objections or supporters, but we do have the agent Ian York. If you'd like to turn your microphone on, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Ian York, a planning director at Lichfields. The applicant, Field Yaxley Limited, is a leading developer, owner and operator of grid-scale batteries across the UK and Europe. It currently owns 7 battery storage sites in the UK, 3 of which are already operational. I'm today joined by Beck Sherwood, Fields Head of Development, and online by Andy Ray, Fields Quality, Health, Safety and Environment Lead. The country's electricity system is undergoing a vital transformation to tackle climate change and decarbonise by 2030. The National Energy System Operator has identified that one of the biggest problems Great Britain faces is the lack of storage to support intermittent renewable energy generators, such as wind and solar. Without storage, excess energy is wasted and the government pays developers to switch off generators, which cost £1 billion last year. This is expected to triple by 2030 in the absence of storage. When energy demand exceeds supply, polluting gas-fired power stations and expensive imported energy are needed. Energy storage reduces reliance on fossil fuels and imported energy. The government's Clean Power 2030 Action Plan identifies 27 gigawatts of battery storage is needed by 2030. There is currently 5 gigawatts operational. This requires decisive action across the country. The proposed BESS would contribute positively towards the government's net zero targets and the council's sustainability agenda. The site was selected because of its distance away from Yaxley Village and Itown, within a landscape context influenced by adjacent large-scale industry and co-located energy-generating infrastructure at Airfield Industrial Estate. It is also close enough to Yaxley substation that has capacity to accept a connection. The site is not affected by any designated nature conservation areas and is in an area of low flood risk. The design has been guided by landscape considerations, acknowledging the presence of significant development at the industrial estate and the agricultural nature of the site and parts of the wider context. Native planting to bolster the existing boundary planting and hedgerow retention will help integrate the facility within the mixed context and deliver biodiversity enhancements. The significant majority of land surrounding Yaxley substation is either grade 2 or 3 agricultural quality. The site is grade 3, the lowest quality available that could accommodate the development. DEFRA has identified that one of the most significant threats to food security is climate change. We recognise concerns about fire safety. The proposal is entirely compliant with the National Fire Chief Council's requirements. The applicant has been in regular contact with Suffolk Fire and Rescue, who has confirmed it has no objection. The proposal site is located out with all required safety distances from the gas infrastructure in the area. Drax Progress Power and National Gas, who operate the infrastructure assets, have confirmed they have no objections. The drainage scheme has been carefully designed and includes attenuation basins that will release surface water at a controlled discharge rate. The basins include a valve that can be closed to contain fire water in the unlikely event of an incident. There is strong policy support for the principal development and no objections from statutory consultees. Overall, the proposal accords with the development plan and there are no material considerations that would justify its refusal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the agent? Councillor Hardingham.
Yes, I would like to ask what company policies you have in regard of sourcing of lithium and other metals, some of them rare earth metals that might be required for this project, and whether you have ethical and sustainability criteria and use of unethical labour, for instance, in the mining of lithium.
Andy, if you could answer that one online, that would be appreciated. Andy's the sort of fire expert at field.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so yes, we do. We have environmental, social and governance policy, which we are leading the industry on implementation of as part of several industry groups that we're working in and part of, and those policies help us steer our procurement from the initial project throughout the construction of it.
Well, just a follow-up question. I mean, are these in your company policy documents? Something that can be referred to, are they?
Yes, they are. We have a specific ESG policy alongside ISO accreditation in environmental management systems as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Elkin.
Thank you. You mentioned you operate a couple of other BESS sites already. In terms of your sort of emergency response, if there is a fire, what are the actual fumes that might come out of? I know that there's different chemistries, different types of batteries, so I know that impacts it a lot. But what sort of problematic fumes might be coming out if there's a fire, and what sort of advice would you give to a community that lives downwind of one of these sites in the event of a fire?
Again, I guess that's coming to me. So we expect to see the likes of hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, hydrofluoride, and that sort of nasty chemicals coming out in the vapour cloud plumes that would be seen, or certainly if in the event of a fire or thermal runaway. Studies currently that we're in the process of undertaking and that are being undertaken industry-wide show that the level of contaminant within the air beyond 30 metres of the initial kind of incident location are very minimal. We're updating our policies regularly, we're updating our studies regularly, we're looking into information. As you mentioned earlier, the industry is rapidly changing, it's rapidly getting better. The policies, the guidelines, the procedures that are coming out are ultimately changing along with those. Field are in several industry groups. We're looking to we're at the forefront of those groups. We're making changes as we go, and as per this project as well, we'll ensure that we're on top of it. But I think ultimately, no more than 30 metres or so beyond the initial fight, the initial fire or incident location in the battery, would we see any higher than above permissible levels of these chemicals.
Come back.
Is that all right? So, I mean, I represent which is obviously just down the road. There's a new housing estate being developed, which will come closer to this site if the next bits of the neighbourhood plan are developed, and obviously there's a large high school. So, from what you've just said, you wouldn't expect there to be any dangerous toxic chemicals discernible in the air after 30 metres from the actual location of a fire. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes. Like I say, we're carrying out studies at the moment on this, on various types of technology. Each technology has its differences. Primarily, it's the same type of materials used. So we're doing studies based on locations on the actual finished levels of the site, the surrounding areas, and to see where the primary wind rose for that location goes, and then how far those dissipate as well.
Okay. I was just curious because where there's been other fires, there has been advice, for example, for communities to stay indoors with doors closed and windows closed. So I was just wondering.
That's generally the immediate advice, because look, we try and do everything we practically can as quickly as possible. So staying indoors and shutting the windows is immediately solving a potential problem later on in life. Ultimately, the studies we've undertaken and the information we have as an industry suggest that approximately 30 metres beyond the incident location is minimal traces of the chemicals.
Can I jump in there? So hi, I'm Bex Sherwood, the Head of Development at Field. So just to follow on from what Andy said, and also to pick up on a couple of the points from earlier. So Andy actually sits on the industry working group that's working with the NFCC to publish their updated guidance. So, you know, we're really up to date and leading the industry on that. So the scheme complies with the draft 2024 guidance that is expected to be published. And one of the key aims of the working group for this year is to push NFCC to release that guidance, because it keeps on being delayed, and then everyone has more certainty. But as Bron says, that also the requirement is to then update that yearly in line with the guidance. And then on the point of the two accesses, so the two accesses, that's a recommendation of the NFCC guidance, and is so that there's access for emergency vehicles to the site, rather than because of road closure and then needing a different access. On the plume analysis, so it's obviously very dependent on the technology, the exact technology that you use. So we haven't made a final supplier decision, and also technology is changing. But suppliers are doing studies. I think they realise that fire is a key area for BES, so they have done their own studies. And so from a publicly available study, and actually it was used in the Bramford application, is that I think theirs was actually 25 metres. So all of these studies are showing that the plume, the levels of toxic plume, or like acceptable levels, never go out with the actual BES compound itself. So the NFCC guidance is that you've got to be 25 metres away from any other buildings. And so then final point, if it were that Castleton Way would required to close, that would, I think the school is sort of about 600 metres away. So that would be a sort of, as Andy says, a precautionary measure to seal off the site, rather than because that area was at direct risk. Thanks.
Councillor Pratchett.
Thank you, Chair. So is this site, it's probably in the papers, but is this site a manned site or unmanned? So who would be sort of there to deal with any issues, sort of incidents, fire or otherwise? And also, sort of a second question, so is it manned or unmanned? But also, do we in effect then create an exclusion zone for sort of any potential building around it? So industrial, commercial housing, you know, do we in effect, if we approve this, do we then say, well actually, there's this big zone around it which we can no longer do anything with, it has to be sort of an air gap?
I'll take that. So the site will be unmanned. We have several systems that manage the site on a 24/7, 365 basis, including alarms, fire alarms, CCTV systems, and that is through an operational control centre. So that's for question one. Question two, no, we don't have to create a zone around the site. We'll have our site built with a layout whereby if you wanted to use the field next door to build, then that's down to you guys as to sort that out and agree what you want to build in there. There's obviously some consideration got to be taken, whoever the developer is, to whatever they build in that area and the effect that it would have on something that already exists.
Yeah. Councillor Warburton.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, could I ask you a little bit about your own company's safety record? You mentioned you've got 3 sites, I believe, in the UK and other sites across Europe. So what experience have you actually got of managing a safety event at one of these sites?
On our battery projects, we've had no serious events occur to date, touch wood. Myself personally, I come from offshore wind and have done several incidents offshore, not directly related to electrical fires or thermal runaway, so I couldn't particularly give any kind of answer to that question. We've had no incidents so far. We've seen one incident in the UK through an operational project, which was Carnegie Road in Liverpool. It's very well publicised. Recently we've had a couple of incidents during construction of a project down in Essex and a project up in Scotland, which have both taken place during construction, and an effective management and design of those sites respectively have been commended by both fire services who dealt with it to ensure that they were dealt with within 24 hours and both sites were back up and open and ready to operate again.
Can I just add another bit? Just to, when Andy says we there, he means we, the BES industry, have had incidents, not we, field. So there's been, as Andy says, there's been no incidents at field sites. And also the fact that we have operational and construction sites, which means we can use those for learnings and teachings. So we take the fire service to our sites, at each of our sites before construction, to show them the plans, talk them through what the site's going to be look like. And then there's a condition, so we've got the outline battery safety management plan, which goes in at this stage, and there's a condition that that's finalised pre-construction once the equipment is chosen, and that includes the emergency response plan, which is developed in consultation with the local fire service, so that they know and understand how to respond in that case, and that's something that we've done at all of our operational sites.
Councillor Elkin.
Can I ask, you mentioned you work in consultation with the fire service. We're in Eye on the border with Norfolk, so Eye is probably about 8-9 minutes from the fire station in Diss in Norfolk, and depending on the traffic on the A roads, quite a long way from any fire service in Suffolk. So I just wondered how that works for you. Do they consult with each other over who would respond in something like this? Are their views considered as well?
Ultimately, yes. We've spoken to Suffolk regularly and Norfolk about various projects we're doing in the area, or we're considering in the area, and both respective fire services have been very forthcoming with information, very supportive of what we're doing, and the fact that we're actually reaching out to them early on with engagement. I think when we come down to more finer detail, like Bex has just said there, before the construction actually starts, we firm up when we know the technology and we know the final layouts of the site and the planning permissions all accepted. The management plans and the emergency response plans get finalised with consultation with the fire and rescue service, including the resources they have available to them. So there might be several volunteer services in the area, there might be several manned services in the area. Some areas have high reach equipment, some areas don't, and that all factors into the emergency response plan we create for this project.
Thank you. Yeah, there is a very small semi-volunteer fire service in Eye, but I think they're incredibly short-staffed nearly all the time. But they would be the nearest. Can I ask a question? The question I asked Bron earlier, and she thought it might be for the applicant, was about the water in the event of an incident. I think you have to have 2 hours worth. And it was a question of what happens if there is a large-scale fire that lasts several days, what happens after the 2 hours. My understanding is that water is not, as Bron said, not to put out the fire, it's to cool containers around it so that they don't also ignite. But yeah, what happens when you've run out of your 2 hours? And I know sorry, I've got a second question, but...
If I can answer your first one first, and then you can ask me the second one. So the requirement from the NFCC is 1,900 litres a minute for 2 hours is the minimum requirement on site. That's 228,000 litres of water. So we will store that on site as a minimum. The fire service appliances that arrive will also contain an amount of water. The 2 attenuation ponds on the project will have an area capable to take more than that requirement. So any water that we use will go into those attenuation ponds through the site drainage system. As Bron mentioned, the head wall of the site, which runs into the main local system, will have an attenuation, will have a valve in there where on set off of the alarms, it will close and any water will be collected into the system. If we run out of water, which we don't see being the case due to the controlled burn strategy we're employing here, is that we will just reuse the water that we have there via the fire service pumps that they have.
And are the ponds lined?
They will be lined, yes.
So none of that water, if it is, I can appreciate it would be going on containers, not on the fire, but if it's going through a toxic plume, then it might be picking up all sorts of stuff, but that can't get into the aquifer. Is that what you're saying?
We're saying that all the water that we would spray on to the surrounding area we expect should not be contaminated, because we're putting it onto metal containers to cool them down. So I get your point, reference the contamination through the vapour clouds. Ultimately, because of the quantity of water that we'd be putting on, if and when we needed to put it on, it would dilute and we would be testing it prior to releasing it into the system. So where the valve is to stop the water flowing into the system, we would have a manhole there where we would take some tests of the water from, and if it came back as contaminated above normal levels, then we tanker that off site and carry on doing that until it reached a level of non-contamination.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a second question?
I think that was my second question.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you. Yes, if I could just come back to the question of community benefit. The Council's low carbon energy position statement states, to paraphrase, that proposals for renewable and low carbon energy development should have regard to community benefit and address those matters explicitly in any submissions. Have you come to any agreement with the local council for a community benefit fund? I realise this is outside of the planning matters, but nevertheless it's something which is of interest, and there are community benefit funds associated with the wind turbines, for example.
I mean, it was a matter that was discussed at the public exhibition we did a few months ago now. My understanding is that Field are open to those discussions, and I suppose it's just about defining a project that the local community wants and can own, and work with Field, who will stay on site and operate and be within the community for the next 40 years. So my understanding is that Field are very much open to that. It's just trying to define what that project may look like.
And so on that, so something that we are doing, what we actually, so my background is also in offshore wind, and there's huge sums of money given, and actually communities find that money quite hard to spend, quite hard to manage. And so what we've done as at Field across all of our projects is we've done an education programme. So it's a pack for schools, it's a teacher resource pack that educates on renewable energy. It's not just batteries, it's renewable energy industry, why we need it, what jobs are available in it, how to go about getting those jobs, and also some tasks for the students to do so that when it comes to job interviews and CVs, they have some stuff to put on their CVs. So it's an annual programme. We launched it in summer 2024, so it was available runs with the school year, and will run again from 2025. And so the idea is that we can do it, target locally schools around our site. It is available across the country, but we target schools within a certain area. And I was just looking up some figures. So to date, it's reached over 2,500 pupils since launching in the September school year. So that's sort of, and then obviously community benefits sort of should be proportional to the scale of impact, and with batteries being a sort of very energy dense technology, it's obviously actually quite a small site in terms of impact.
Are there any other questions for the agent? I've actually got a question which I did ask Bron before. Bron, could you put the page 24 from the table of papers up?
Sure, give me just a second.
So could I just ask you that there's a green circle that says hazardous I don't know, items or something that Bron said was to do with the gas pipe and not you guys. Can you just confirm that that is
yes,
correct?
that's correct. Any kind of above ground gas facility has what you call an ATEX zone, or a zone where small amounts of gas are released, which becomes hazardous if there's an ignition source. So that area there is the ATEX zone of that gas facility.
Okay, cool, thank
you.
The
zone of influence, if you like. So if we were to have an issue within that zone, you could expect a problem depending on the concentration of gas, the wind, several other things that contribute to that.
I mean, it's quite a small circle. You know, if it's gas in the air, you know, next to something that could be, in theory, on fire for several days.
Every gas facility worldwide will have small leakage of gas at pipe junctions, at flanges, and all that other stuff that goes with gas facilities. That will leak, and I mean, National Gas could tell you a figure of what comes out at that point, I would hope. We don't anticipate any of our facility going on flames for several days. Like I say, like I've said prior, the two projects, both Essex and Scotland, were less than 24 hours while it was under control.
So are there any other questions before we move on? So we have the Suffolk County Councillor here, Jessica Fleming. If you'd like to turn on your microphone, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I will hurry through what I have to say, which largely relates to public safety and flood and water management. As Thrandurston and Yaxley Parish Council have expressed, there is an enormous amount of public concern over this proposal. The church hall was packed with worried residents and who had a lot of questions. Residents and councillors were not reassured, however, by the local responses, particularly how the local area would be protected in the event of a fire or a thermal runaway, which would imply that more than one battery unit caught on and they caught each other, set each other off. The fire department I've also been in contact with at Suffolk County Council, and this has clarified that its response to a battery fire incident would be to let it burn due to difficulties in accessing sufficient quantities of water and lack of appropriate protocols. As we've heard, the current standards for responding to battery fires are under review. And as also has been said, local fire personnel are largely volunteers. They are not trained to deal with battery fires or serious hazard incidents of this kind. Secondly, I would like to address flood risk and aquifer protection. The best site would increase impervious surfaces at Eye Airfield and add to the existing flood and water management problems. I do note in the Environment Agency's response, EA Condition 5, that the Environment Agency does not want to see ground infiltration from this development without a specific risk assessment. So you're going to have water there gathering and an issue of how to deal with it, because it can't be just let back into the ground. That issue, as I understand, is as yet unresolved. The location poses a serious threat to the underlying aquifer And the batteries themselves, as well as the storage lagoon, would contain water contaminated potentially by battery pollutants. The seriousness of dealing with a potentially catastrophic situation does not seem to have been properly considered. As we know, there are schools, a care home, residences and industries close by. A fire, particularly a fire involving more than one unit, would release toxic air pollutants requiring local evacuation. This matter, as part of a planning application, is almost unprecedented and has not been openly discussed, in my opinion. We did dwell on the types of contamination that we're looking at from a battery fire. Some examples: heavy metals such as cobalt, nickel, aluminium and copper, organic solvents, noxious gases include hydrofluoric, hydrochloric and phosphoric acid. Byproducts for burning include PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, that is, phosphorus compounds, dioxins and furans. And that is just a few of the things that would be in a toxic cloud. In summary, the unresolved problems of public safety, flood and water management and aquifer protection are not adequately addressed. This site is highly unsuitable for its proposed use, and I ask the committee to think carefully and refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions for the County Councillor? Okay, thank you very much, Jess. And now we will hear from our ward member, Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Chair. And the committee will be pleased to know that I've been furiously editing my statement to remove some unnecessary repetition in terms of what's been said already by several people, but I will focus on a couple of those that I think are salient. So it's the third time in less than a year that I've addressed committee regarding an energy application in my ward, a synchronous condenser in Yaxley, which is now constructed. It's impressive and it's really rather big. A second solar array in Palgrave, which together with an immediately adjacent approved separate array is of an NSIP proportion, and today this battery installation. As anticipated, there were mixed views from among the communities I represent. Only very few are wholly unsupportive of sustainable energy and its associated infrastructure. But I've spoken with nobody that doesn't acknowledge the benefits of clean energy. Almost everyone whose views I've heard, however, eventually settle on three key points regarding this application: flooding, safety, and cumulative impact. I think the matter of pluvial water has been covered in this committee by Councillors Patchett, Elkin, and Marriott. So without rehearsing those again, I'll summarise their remarks by making a broader point that where individual mitigations are agreed on a piecemeal basis per application, there remain implications for areas where multiple applications are brought forward, such as this site. And a wider strategic plan for water management on the airfield is required, because they don't seem to be considered as part of individual applications. And I'll come back to that when talking about cumulative impact in a bit. Coming to safety, it was a concern to me from a position of pure logic only that joint agencies have agreed that the proximity of a potentially highly incendiary plant to a significant high-pressure gas main can be considered reasonable. I note that Suffolk Fire and Rescue Service look forward to working with the applicant to produce an acceptable emergency response plan prior to construction. In terms of providing assurance to the local communities and the school, I think this application would have benefited from production of that emergency response plan for committee to consider here today. And as Councillor Elkin remarked, that should incorporate arrangements for stakeholders, neighbouring settlements, the school, but also other immediately adjacent businesses. Since that plan hasn't been forthcoming, I make a request to committee today to consider imposing a condition to support Suffolk Fire and Rescue Services statement, and the options I believe are available to you are as follows: that you could resolve to grant, subject to officers being in receipt of an agreed plan, that you could grant but before work on development starts have the plan in place, or you could grant but before the before the battery is activated, have the plan in place. I think there's 3 options that are available there. So I'd invite you to consider imposing one of those as a condition. Turning to cumulative impact, the committee can give consideration to the cumulative impact of this existing and proposed that's in progress applications. The existing energy infrastructure and this proposal will shortly be joined by a significant NSIP in the near vicinity, impacting on exactly the same communities. Again. So I wonder what would need to happen for cumulative impact to constitute a material consideration to limit the harms caused to these communities by transforming the entire character of their environments. That's probably a question I should be asking to Bron, and I probably will do in a bit. Finally, I'm happy that Councillor Hardingham's raised the skylight mitigation for 40 years. A precedent was set in a planning inspectorate decision, and I raised it here in connection with another application. I believe it was the Palgrave solar application. 40 years was conditioned then, and I'm hopeful that, that subject to officer advice, we'd be able to do the same here. And finally, I can assure you that Yaxley and Fandeston Parish Councils would not be challenged in finding opportunities to utilise a very generously provisioned Community Benefit Award. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Does anyone have any questions for Tim? Okay, I will move the item on to the debate then. Who would like to start? Someone. Thank you, James.
Go on then. You know, we do need these battery energy storage plants. So, you know, we have approved some in the past, but I think, like Councillor Hardingham has sort of reiterated twice, that the previous ones did have quite a good package for the local area, and I think it wasn't the last one £50,000 or something every year for 40 years to the ones in Bramford. So that was quite a good package. I'm not seeing that same benefit immediately for the local residents, but again, part of me can't help thinking that this is kind of like act 1 scene 1 of a disaster movie. Picture the scene: local authority approves battery storage facility, you know, a substance that cannot be extinguished by water in an area that has not very much water sat on top of a high pressure gas main. All of my common sense synapses in my brain are sort of going, this is crazy. Like, what are we doing? You know, this substance can't be extinguished. Let's put it on top of a gas main. Brilliant. Yeah, so as you can tell, I've got some concerns about that. But, you know, not really going to give my position either way of, you know, what way I'm thinking, but just, yeah, strong concerns on my part. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I'm also similar to my fellow councillor. I feel that the risks to the locals, we're playing what ifs, mights, maybes, rather like a movie. I mean, that's not proven. The high risk, yes, it's a high risk, but it's not happened. A battery energy storage plant over a gas main, a high risk gas main, high pressured, has not, to my knowledge, or nobody can name one, ever been built before. So I'm having a problem thinking, why are we even considering locating it and making these risks to the locals? And there are other areas where planning has been granted for even closer to existing current houses. And I wonder, are the developers actually aware of this happening as well? Because it's going to affect the value of their homes, the saleability, and all of that. It's going to have a knock-on effect on the local communities, which I, at the moment, feel are under attack.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Councillor Warboys?
Yeah, I find I'm very conflicted over this. And a word that's being used over and over again today is accumulative impacts. We have approved battery storage systems, but this is another. We have approved planning applications on our airfield, and we're aware of the impact on the drainage system. This is another impact. We've been talking about the community feeling a sense of being under siege. And I sympathise enormously with that, because that is what is happening. Without any strategic plan, we don't know what is coming next. We've got an inkling, but we don't know exactly what's coming next. It just seems to be one project after another. We've been asked, I think, here to sort of decide what is acceptable risk or what is not an acceptable risk. I am convinced that Field have done a good job here. They've got 100% safety record, and they've obviously sort of liaised extensively between various emergency services, particularly the fire service department. But that's another concern, though. Since 2010, there's been a 24% reduction in staff in our fire services. They're primarily funded by Suffolk County Council. A recent inspection has found that they're effectively operated stations and services, and there's going to be investments of 1.6 million over the next 2 years. But have they got the resources to adequately respond to an emergency at a site like this? We're talking about fire tanks supplying water. Are the tanks going to be big enough? And we're talking about, if they aren't big enough, then the fire will just be allowed to burn. There's a school of just over 1,000 pupils within a few hundred yards. It'd be very difficult to sort of, with a clear conscience, really approve this application. Simply on the, as Councillor Morgan said, it seems a strange thing to put two potential hazards next to each other. But I'm not sure we've got the actual effective means of actually refusing it. We've got the vote, yes.
I have to say I feel very similarly to what's been said already. I think seeing the gas pipe and the constraints, you know, sort of river, and then planting this, you know, straight in the middle of it seems, you know, if there's a constraint to map out there, surely everything needs to be out of, you know, its sphere of influence. And like, I don't like the very fact of putting them both together, really. And if it's being looked at that this is the worst sort of land to sacrifice, I'd rather it, frankly, went on better agricultural land, was further away from the school and the gas pipe. But that's what I'm thinking. I'm worried we haven't got quite enough to turn this down. But anyway.
Yeah, we've been hearing strong messages around commitment to and compliance with best standards, and I do appreciate that. But there's also an acknowledgement this is a developing and ever-changing science with studies and learning ongoing. For example, do we know with full certainty the minimal traces of toxic fumes beyond the 30-metre zone will not have a significant impact on human health in the long term? And there is a real risk that what is seen now as legally acceptable could be shown to be dangerous over time. I'm feeling that I can't put my name to supporting an application that potentially puts local children and young people at risk. I spent 35 years professionally protecting children. That was my goal. And I sit very uncomfortably with that decision.
Thank you. Yeah, on the one hand, I mean, there is acceptance locally that Airfield is a centre for sort of this kind of commercial development. It doesn't look very pretty already. It's not a terrible place in that sense to put things that don't look great. And there's broadly, I think people are accepting that we're in an energy transition and that these best systems are part of that and we need them. But on the other hand, everyone who's expressed an opinion to me locally is concerned about all the things that have been mentioned, the cumulative impact of this being one of many projects, drainage issues, especially the safety issues. It's an unmanned site. Eye is quite far from everywhere. The traffic is often not great on the A roads, and it can take a long time for emergency services to get to us. So it will be local people in Eye and maybe Yaxley who are the ones responding in the first case if something bad does happen at some point. So I think I would hope that we could maybe have some sort of condition or informative or whatever is needed, so that, as Councillor Weller said, that there is a full developed emergency plan in place consulting all stakeholders, including the schools, including the local businesses, and including the relevant town and parish councils before any switches get turned on. I am really concerned about the water side of it, potential pollution to the aquifer, and particularly concerned, as Councillor Overett has said, we've heard that the various chemicals in the plume are not considered unsafe, but some of these I think are forever chemicals, as they're called. I'm not a chemist. We have to go on the assurances we've been given of the experts, but we do have a school, lots of residential areas just not very far upwind of this, so it does feel very uncomfortable to be trusting that there is absolutely nothing that's going to come forward in the future in any of this material that could be in the air that could be harmful. With the gas pressure, I mean, again, we just have to trust the experts. It seems absolutely crackers, but if those who are experts in these things are saying that it doesn't pose a risk, then at a certain point, I guess we have to trust them. But it doesn't seem to make common sense. But if that's the advice that we have been given, then I think we have to accept the advice we've been given. So yes, I am still mulling. For the interests of, I probably have more skin in the game, as they say, as both my children attend that school. So I'm trying to be very rational about it. And I would be asking exactly the same questions if it was other people's children, not mine. And I'm just trying to ask the questions that people in the community have asked me to put forward. So yeah, still thinking about this one.
Councillor Hardingham?
Yes, well, as Councillor Elkin has just said, I think this boils down to a question of trust, really. Do we trust our professional advisors and experts to have come up with the right answers as to the safety of the site? Obviously we're not in a position to make those judgments ourselves, even though common sense might suggest you would go the other way. And the other point I would like to think about is, we've heard about cumulative impact quite a lot, but it's never been clear to me at what point one could actually refuse a planning application on the grounds of cumulative impact. It's mentioned in the background, but it never comes up as being a concrete argument. So perhaps somebody could advise us on that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy to come in at that. Cumulative impact is always a difficult one in terms of what might happen in the future. We can't predict that, and you'll have heard us say frequently we've got to determine the application in front of us. So essentially we can look back at what's happened, at what is consented, so we're adding each time, and we're adding one on top. And the next time something comes in, we're going to add it on top of this one. So it's looking at that in a consecutive way. We know we've got the Progress Power gas-fired power station, we know we've got the gas main, we know we've got the synchronous condensers and the substation. That is all part and parcel of what we're going to take into account. What we can't take into account is that there is a likelihood that other schemes might come forward in the future. Those schemes will have to take this scheme into account. Similarly to what we do with housing, the first 10 houses might not have an impact, but if somebody comes in and builds another 5 or 10, we'll add them on essentially. It is that same method. So yeah, what we're looking at there is that in itself would be measured against what's either there or consented at the moment. I hope that helps clarify it. Thank you.
Thanks. Would the people who haven't yet contributed to the debate like to add their thoughts? Councillor Marriott?
I'm unhappy about the proximity of the gas pipe, and also the risk to the children in the school. One likes to listen to experts and to be able to trust them, but I'm afraid I can never totally trust experts, and I think to some degree we do have to rely on our own common sense in the interest of safety. I'm not totally decided which way I'm going to go at the moment. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak before we ask Gemma for some advice? Gemma, would you like to give us a lecture?
Yeah, I'm happy to see what we can do. So I'm hearing concern generally. I'm not hearing anybody suggesting we're at the officer recommendation, but feel free to shout at me if I'm going the wrong way with that. You've got some options open to you, whether there's more conditions and that would make you feel satisfied about that. I think we've obviously suggested a tranche of conditions, but if that's not enough to make people feel comfortable, the following options are defer for some specific information if there is some you want. You could defer for a risk assessment on a specific reason for refusal if you had something like that in mind. So just plain deferral on, I think we did one last time with Persimmon that we wanted some more information on how the houses were designed and they'll come back to us. So similar grounds, if there are things like that on this that you would just plain defer, get some more information, come back. Or is there a reason in there that you would like to work on and that then goes away? I would suggest in this case probably for a risk assessment and comes back for further advice if that's what you're minded to do. They're my kind of next, I mean you can feel free to refuse completely, it is in committee's gift, I wouldn't like to say, but that would be my starting thoughts.
Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair, and I do take on board the advice from the sort of planning officer, but I think with our particular concerns on this site, I don't think a deferral will actually change where this site is. And I think it's its proximity to the school, and I think it's its proximity to our airfield and the cumulative impacts, and obviously it's sat on top of the gas main. So you could keep kicking this can down the road, but that site at that location will not change our thoughts. So no one has actually come with a proposal to approve, so I will come up with a proposal to refuse to actually get something done. So I will propose to refuse on the grounds of safety and proximity to the school and the cumulative effects, and I look to the committee for a seconder.
Councillor Morgan, would you like to second that?
I'm prepared to second this on the same grounds as my fellow councillors.
I think that's fine. We just need to expand on the reason. I think I've got something there, and just to run through some of those points, if that's okay with you, Chair. So I would still suggest that we defer for a risk assessment on those grounds. It's open to you, but that would be my preference to do so, or alternatively to delegate. I can see Ian itching there as well.
Just to make sure everyone in the room, members I mean, who matter, understand what because it may not happen very many times recently, that a risk assessment means for the officers to come back and advise members on the risks of refusing for that reason, i.e. the probabilities and chances of defending that on appeal if we had to, etc. That is what you meant, Gemma, I assume? Yeah.
Would you like to speak, Councillor Warboys?
Yes. Trying to get my thoughts on. Yeah, yes, I was listening to risk assessment and I was looking at it in a completely different way, because I think what we're thinking of is the cumulative risk to this additional development on the airfield site. All of these developments have brought some risk. The gas power station, the existing Progress Power, the wind turbines. Across the road you've got the substation, and you've got a condenser there. All of these things have got elements of risk. And I think what we're looking at here is there's a certain element of risk with the gas pipe station just being there on its own. So now we're looking at a cumulative risk. And I haven't come across that in the MPPF, perhaps I missed it, but is that a way of actually looking at sort of refusing this, or deferring it to sort of just assess this accumulative risk, and as whether it's a substantial reason to refuse, or a reasonable reason to refuse this development?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Ian's clarified. What I meant there is, yes, that we would be risk assessing the reason for refusal, that we would agree today. As part of that, we could potentially look at any others that come up during that assessment and report back to yourselves. I think we've dealt with cumulative matters in the report from my recollection, and from the works Bron has done. But again, we could potentially look to provide any further update on that one. Just having had a scroll through policies based on those reasons, I have got something that we could look at, but it might be that members want to add, change or amend that. So if I kind of run through the details on that. So again, wording I've put down for the moment, but we'll come back to if we want to, is to defer for a risk assessment on refusal for the following reason. So the proposal would, by reason of the location of the site, including the proximity of the gas pipeline with residential properties in the school nearby, have an unacceptable impact on the local community and amenity, contrary to policies LP 24.1, LP 25.1A and B, and I think I've missed a bit, sorry, I had a LP 15.3A. They're quite specific bits, so I'm happy to read those aloud if that would help members just solidify those reasons. Sorry if I just said that in because I've missed LP 15. So if I do them probably backwards at LP 15 first for you. Okay. So LP 15.3A, this would looking at pollution and environmental amenity and requires us to prevent or where practicable mitigate and reduce to a minimum all forms of possible pollution, including but not limited to air, land, ground and surface water, waste, odour, noise, light and any other general amenity, including public amenity and visual amenity impacts. This must be convincingly demonstrated by impact assessments where appropriate. So to my mind, that is one of the things members seem to have raised a concern about that has a specific policy link. And then the other parts were, let me just find them, sorry. LP 24.1 is the next part. I'll just a bit of scroll on my part. 24.1.
So you basically, in a nutshell, you're wanting to reassure us that everything is doubly safe rather than saying we're going to stick at the other side of the A140.
In term, what I'm looking at is a reason for refusal on the grounds of the concerns you've raised that putting it on top of a gas pipeline in that proximity to houses and a school would be a risk, and that those are the policy reasons for doing so. So just running through those policies to see if there were any other concerns that I haven't.
If I may jump in as well. I mean, I think what's at the back of Gemma's mind as much as mine is if we have a refusal and an appeal, we have to call evidence as the local planning authority to defend our reasons for refusal. I think Gemma's being too polite to spell it out a bit, but we have situations where we're in difficulty calling evidence, even though we respect members' common sense and local knowledge, but I think both of us in our careers have had situations where we've almost been on the point of saying to members, I'm really sorry, but you're going in the witness box, not us on this, or we'll have to look for somebody outside the council to give another opinion. But I think, again, I hope...
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've not been in this situation before in terms of these sorts of applications. So it is a fairly novel circumstance to say let's refuse on that ground. It's not like the residential ones where we've got one down pat that we use regularly that we've defended on appeal. We have had some advice that suggests this is okay, hence our recommendation. So I would always urge caution in that situation. We could find ourselves at appeal, unable to defend it if we can't find, as Ian mentions, a witness to defend our position. And by having that risk assessment, that deferral ahead, it gives us the opportunity to come to you and say, yes, we've got someone, they absolutely agree, and these are other grounds we'd like to explore with you, or are you really sure you want to do this? Because we've gone out and we've got some more advice, we've looked into this further, and everybody says, not to worry, it'll be absolutely fine. And part of just popping through the policies now was just to see if there are any other points in there that members felt we should include in that assessment at the current time. So just to briefly pick up on that, LP 24 for, I think it was 2(1), was protect the health and amenity of occupiers and surrounding uses by avoiding development that is various things, overlooking, but also includes unacceptable levels of light pollution, noise, vibration, odour, emissions and dust and other amenity issues. I felt that might drop into the amenity, the school, the pollution that was referenced potentially. And lastly, 25(1)A, which is the impact on, but not limited to, various things, but it does include residential amenity, but it also includes, and the local community having been fully taken into consideration and where appropriate, effectively mitigated. So they were some snippets of policies. They are small parts. That is what we're looking at, saying it's contrary to, based on what I felt members had got to. Is that about there? I'm happy to run through that again because I appreciate that's quite a lot of information in quite a short space of time. Thank you.
Would you like us to run through it again?
I'd just like to say I'd like to chip in at this point, which is that I've been flip-flopping over this one, but I think I'm coming down on one side now. I feel that there are obviously all sorts of technological reasons for putting this thing where it is. We need battery energy storage. I drive an electric car and I'm not frightened of the battery that I'm sitting on. I'm inclined to think that Airfield is maybe a good site to put this sort of thing rather than a greenfield site like the last one, albeit it was next to the substation at Bramford, but you know, out in open countryside. So I don't feel that I wouldn't feel happy turning this one down. That's my position. It may be a sort of technocratic way of looking at things, but you know, we rely on technology and we rely on the experts who assess the safety of these things, and we're completely, as a society, completely committed to that.
Well, at the moment we have a proposal on the table. James, how are you feeling? Would you like to stand with what you're saying? Would you rather follow Gemma's advice to turn it into deferral? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I would still like to refuse it. I think, you know, quite often we are sort of, we're guided by these kind of grants and refusals by the officers. And, you know, they're doing their risk management of, you know, are we going to go into litigation with this, or, you know, are we not? I think it's quite poignant today that I will be leaving here and I'll be going to Councillor Eban's memorial, and I think we're all elected members and we're all here to do what's right for the public of Mid Suffolk. And I think, you know, putting an item on top of a gas main that cannot be extinguished is not great for public safety. And I'd like to think, well, what would Rachel do in this situation? She wouldn't want to put any public in Mid Suffolk at any harm. So I'll stand firm that I think we do have enough grounds to refuse this, and the officer has demonstrated that there are a number of things that grounds for refusal. So I think I'd like to go to that memorial, not with a heavy heart, but with a happy heart that I've done something good for the people of Mid Suffolk, and I'll keep the proposal to refuse on the table as long as I have a seconder.
I am happy to second still, because I am still, there is, as far as I'm aware, no other site in the United Kingdom with battery storage plant on top of a high risk gas main. If we can find one and the risk management has been taken and the council and the planning and have granted, but otherwise we're facing the fact that we are the first council that are going to possibly put this through, and I don't want my name associated to accepting it. So therefore I second my colleague Councillor Paget's refusal.
Thank you. So Gemma, would you like to run through what we've got?
Yes, can I confirm, are we going to defer to risk assess because that would be my advice. I'm open to Ian.
Sorry, I'm probably not allowed to speak, but it might. There are batteries next to gas pipelines that already exist.
So, Gemma, would you like to reiterate again?
Yeah. So I'm understanding the proposal is to refuse for the reason, and I've got that draft reason that I've read out, and I'm happy to read out again. As I said, I would urge caution that ideally risk assessing. That does not mean we're not going to take that into account. You get a second chance on it, but it gives us the opportunity to get some more advice to add, amend that reason for refusal beyond the specifics here today, that there may be other things based on professional technical advice if we take that away. I obviously have written something, I've done what I can with the information I've got to hand, but that always is in a fairly short period of time, and that's why I would tend to urge taking it away, but obviously that's members' decision.
Okay, so this is tricky because at the moment we've got two people here who are definitely saying no. I'd like to go with Gemma's advice. Nick is saying he'd like to, so we've got a whole mix here, so who knows how the vote's going to go. But if people want to continue the debate, then I'm happy to. So, Roland?
I think we've been in a similar position over solar farm where we refused something and then sometime later we accepted it, but we ran into penalties because of the time we took to take it. So I'm just asking, how long would it take to do a risk assessment, and would that be within the time necessary to make an effective decision? Because I don't see anything wrong with actually knowing what we're risking. I'm very averse to sort of plunging into the unknown, and this is a bit of the whole thing is a bit of a plunge into the unknown.
Out what you had in mind, at least members can the proposal second and disagree if they want, but is that be helpful, do you think? If it's all right with you?
Absolutely, yeah. Yep, happy to. So at the moment, what we do with that reason for refusal, the draft reason for refusal I've got would be that the proposal would, by reason of the location of the site, including the proximity of the gas pipeline with residential properties and a school nearby, have an unacceptable impact on the local community and amenity, contrary to policy LP 24.1 and LP 25.1A and B and LP 15.3A. Thank you.
Councillor Elkin.
I guess I've maybe got a slightly different take on it in that I would be interested in deferring and hearing more information from experts. I was wondering, I appreciate we've had information from experts and they're saying it's fine, but is there a way of seeking a second opinion? Particularly on things like the location near the gas.
So we would probably go back out to Suffolk Fire and Rescue, our environmental health team, National Grid, so it would be a second ask, but with that specific concern in mind to get some more information from them. We have been out to council before, so there are different various specialists. I don't think I've heard of one doing battery energy storage, but they are various specialists when we go out to council, and they'll say, I've defended against these reasons, I'd be happy to, or I don't think you've got a chance to appeal, and then we can present to you and say, okay, this is the sort of advice we've got, this is the risk, this is where we could go to. In terms of a timescale, difficult to say. I think we've turned them around for sort of one of the following committees, but I'm going to look at Claire for dates. I think we have got a bit of a gap in committees, so where that would leave us dates-wise would probably be maybe early June, so that would be roughly what we'd be looking at.
I think, if I may, once or twice when members have been seriously unhappy with the advice of County Council on highways and traffic, we've gone to an external engineer, but they are engineers who are experts in highways and traffic and more available than experts on these fields, which are a bit more specialised, I think, is a fair comment.
Well, I feel like James, really, that I don't want to have my name anywhere near this, and forever in history, something these group of idiots thought it was a good idea. And so I think getting it, frankly, like what Lucy said, basically a second opinion, but more advice to reassure us that this is, you know, I feel happy with that. Anyway, carry on, Lucy. Did you?
Thank you. Sorry, it was just, I mean, my sense is people in the community, they're not being NIMBYs. They know the airfield is a good place for sort of messy, dirty, unpleasant to look at projects. They want to be reassured that it's safe and that it's been looked at from every possible angle. So I was just going to ask, if we do go away and ask for more info, for example, environmental health may have looked at it as it's the normal things like construction, but did they look at it, what if the thing is on fire for 3 days? You know, so could we really sort of stress test it, I guess, as to the worst possible scenarios? And then if the information we get from experts is, we've looked at it, it's fine, then I can hold my head up and go back to say to people in I, we've been told it's fine, but I don't feel that at the moment.
Go for it, Gemma.
Yeah, I was just going to say, absolutely, I think we could raise the points raised today about, you know, the direction of the wind travel, the likelihood of the smoke spreading, what that smoke might have. Are they all things that you've got? Potentially we could invite some of those people to come to committee so that we can get that bit more information for you. And I think that's probably where I was thinking about deferral-wise, is it gives us that chance to go through some of those things. If you're still not happy, you've then got a fully detailed, worked-up reason for refusal that we've got more advice on, or you've got enough information to say, actually, the balance takes us a different way, but it gives everybody a bit more information on it than we've got today.
Yes, I'm happy with that. Councillor Morgan.
I apologise if I was incorrect in saying that it might be the first high-pressure gas main directly below a proposed battery storage thing. But can we please add in to these investigations and reassurances, can we find out where else these plants are and their reasons isn't that they were granted officially by the planning and things, just for our reassurance, please, and make sure that there are high-pressure gas main ones. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Councillor Elkin.
Sorry, it was just one other quick thing. We heard from the applicant that communities have had trouble spending money from community funds. Speaking from experience, I don't think I will have any trouble at all spending any contribution. We have the Progress Power, we have the iTurbines Fund, which are well used and have contributed quite a lot to the local community. So as part of, if there's any deferral, could that be rediscussed, and could the issues with the all the stakeholders being part of an emergency response be perhaps part of that as well?
Yeah, I think that would be reasonable of us to take that emergency response plan away and see if that can be worked up, if not a final version, again, at least a little bit more information. And certainly in terms of the community benefits scheme, you had my similar thoughts to that, which is there is the one running, the potential to link into that. I don't know, we might need some legal advice to take that away, but yes, it is up and running and got a couple of schemes joined together, so no necessary reason why we can't look at that. So I think they're all points we can take away. I probably can't put that word for word in a deferral, but Bron and myself here, I've made various notes, so we've shared those between us, so I'm sure we can make sure we cover those points if you're minded to go with a deferral. Jane.
Councillor Pratchett.
Obviously the mood music in the room is that people are kind of more leaning towards they want to do a deferral, so let's propose that we go for a deferral, but I want the officers to be, in their investigation, be leaning on the risk of us refusing, rather more on the kind of benefits of granting, you know, because I can't really see this committee having any appetite towards approving this currently, but we certainly need more information, definitely.
And so you're going to withdraw your proposal. So we need a new proposal for a deferral, and who would like to make that? Councillor Hardingham?
Yes, I would propose then that, since that's the view of the committee at large, we go for a deferral and a risk assessment.
Good stuff. I'm happy to second it. Councillor Elkin, brilliant. Okay, let's go take that to the. Does Gemma want to go through that?
I think we've probably caught it, haven't we? I'm happy to if you prefer me to, but
yeah, exactly. So I'll ask the governance officer to conduct a vote.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, all those in favour of a deferral, please. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Non-requested, Chair.
Committee will be on Wednesday the 7th of May at 9:30 in the Council Chamber. And thank you all for coming, and see you guys later.